The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 141-160. Chapter 141-Life and Death Crisis. The three kept cooperating to launch their own spells at the poison sac leopard, and Seal was also a little anxious. If he could use elemental magic, would he still be afraid of the big cat in front of him? The helpless thing is that at this time, Sha'ur can clearly feel the strong elemental power around him, but he just can't mobilize it. The helpless Sha'ur can only try hard to recall the memories Slytherin left him, while constantly cast spells. Fortunately, Slytherin left himself not only a large amount of undigested magical knowledge, but also a large amount of spellcasting experience himself, which made Seal a lot easier, at least those unfamiliar spells Char felt like. It is the same as having used it countless times, and it comes out naturally. And the poison sac leopard is not a cat. In a small room, the poison sac leopard can always move to the limit against the wall and a few dilapidated furniture, avoiding a lot of three people. The curse, and the occasional hits, also relied on its powerful magical immunity to resist the past. But the three of them found something wrong. This poison sac leopard doesn't know the reason. The hatred value seems to be on Seal, and if he can attack Seal, he will never attack other people. Sha'ur also discovered this, which made Sha'ur want to cry without tears. Finally, the poison sac leopard seems to be unable to stand this kind of aggrieved scene. As the king, when he was limited by the environment and was bullied by three people, so the poison sac leopard roared, and the poison sac at the neck that was visible to the naked eye began to start constantly expanding. Newt seemed to notice this situation, and immediately yelled at the two of them, "No, back." The poison sac leopard wants to release the poisonous fog in a large area. Miranda walks away, and immediately returns to the Ministry of Magic to ask for support, and the poisonous fog must not be allowed. Spread. I'll take Seal to stand first. No matter what Miranda said, as soon as she grabbed Seal, she was about to rush to the stairs, and Miranda was unequivocal. As soon as Newt's voice fell, Miranda immediately disapparated and disappeared on the battlefield with a snap. At this time, only Newt and Seal were left in the dilapidated apartment. Both of them were rushing towards the stairs, trying to avoid the source of the poisonous fog first. If it is too high, even the bubblehead spell cannot guarantee that there will be no problems. But the two of them far underestimated the speed of the poisonous sac of the leopard. In the open woods, the poisonous fog of the venomous leopard is not so fast, but now it is an almost closed and airtight environment. The poisonous fog caught up with the two, fleeing in almost an instant. In just a few breaths, Seal had completely lost his vision. The intense purple color almost filled Seal's field of vision. The best way to do this is to apparate and leave the battlefield. But unfortunately, because of the movement just now, Seal couldn't find Newt at all when he lost his vision. Although Seal possesses all the magic knowledge of Slytherin, it is a pity that the magic of apparition was invented for no more than 500 years, so Slytherin would not use this magic. If the SLR Seal knew, Seal would have fled this dangerous apartment at the risk of splitting, but unfortunately, Seal didn't know this magic. Newt didn't abandon Seal. He coughed continuously in the thick poisonous mist, shouted Seal's name loudly, and wanted to escape with Seal, but helplessly, the poisonous mist was so thick that both of them lost their lives. Not to mention, Newt couldn't resist this poisonous fog for a long time, no matter how powerful he was. When the crisis was extremely dangerous, Seal calmed down. At this time, Seal remembered the light green light curtain that saved his life just now. After feeling his own situation, he didn't know it was the buff that he stacked. It worked. Although Seal couldn't see anything at this time, he didn't cough as violently as Newt. Charles slowly leaned against the floor and touched the wall, and shouted at Newt, who was still coughing, "Mr. Newt, you retreat first and find a way to save me. I don't know why, but I wasn't affected by the poisonous mist. I can still move. I will lean against the wall and grope slowly, and the meat of the seasoned moonbeast should help me procrastinate for a while." Quote. Newt was still worried about Seal. "No way. Where are you in Seal? I'll find you." Cough, cough, cough. Charles was very calm at this time. If Newt fell here, he would be absolutely helpless. Relying on the officials of the French Ministry of Magic to save him was tantamount to gambling his life. In Newt there is a way to dispel the poisonous fog to save himself. Thinking of this, Seal yelled, "Come on, Mr. Newt, I can walk slowly, but if you don't leave, you will fall into the poisonous fog of the poisonous leopard. And I believe you will definitely find a way. Come and save me." As soon as Seal's voice fell, Newt's violent coughing sound was heard in the distance. Newt, who was helpless, knew that he would never be able to stay for long in this situation. The thing fell down, and he became a burden to Seal. At this time, Newt was full of regrets for why he was inconsistent with dragging Seal to run, but he let go after pulling Seal to run. Suddenly, Newt seemed to think of something, and quickly squatted on the ground to open the box, kept throwing the meat of the seasoned Luna beast around, and yelled at Seal. "Charles, I put a lot of bait around, which should delay you a lot of time. For the poison sac leopard, the meat of the moon kai beast is a delicacy they can't refuse. So you have to hurry. Get out of here quickly. Cough, cough, cough. I'm going outside to find a way to come back to save you, so you must hold on." After Newt finished speaking, he also left the apartment without a slap of ink. Seal naturally heard Newt's voice of leaving, as well as Newt's words of throwing a lot of bait. Seal thanked Newt silently in his heart, raised his wand to guard the surroundings, leaned against the wall and walked quickly towards the stairs. But as soon as Seal touched the handrail of the stairs, 2 pairs of light bulbs appeared in Seal's field of vision and flew towards Seal. It was the poison sac leopard. For some unknown reason, the poison sac leopard abandoned Newt. The bait directly found the location of Seal in the poisonous fog. At this time, Sha'ur was also very angry, and couldn't help but yelled, "Damn, I have a grudge against you, right? Just stare at me." While scolding, the curse in his hand kept firing at the poison sac leopard, but unfortunately, the poison sac leopard was too fast, and he appeared in front of Seal again after a few villas moved. The poison sac leopard in front of Seal just clicked the ground, and then bit towards Seal's neck. Seal naturally couldn't sit still. Thinking of the stairs behind him, Seal gritted his teeth and fell down the stairs. Chapter 142 _ Any gay guys open my pants. All of a sudden, one person and one leopard actually formed 2 perfect parallel lines in the air, with Sha'ur's face below, and the poison sac leopard above with murderous aura. In midair, Seal felt that the magic stone necklace on his chest suddenly became hot, and a large amount of magic power began to pour into Seal's body through the necklace. With the influx of a lot of magic power, the mysterious light green light film beside Seal appeared again. This light green light film was more solid and gorgeous than the previous time. Almost at the moment when the light green light film appeared, the dense poisonous fog around it began to gather around Seal as the center, and the speed became faster and faster. The moment one person and one leopard rolled to the ground, it almost became like a hurricane. In a few seconds, the poisonous mist that had been so thick in the entire apartment was absorbed by the light film on Seal's body. Poison sac leopard kept pacing in front of Seal, looking at Seal with some fear, as if he didn't understand that his means of survival was actually cracked by the silly-looking 2-legged beast on the opposite side. Seal was also sitting on the ground dumbfounded, not knowing what was going on. Who would have thought that a dangerous situation would be solved in such a random manner? Before Seal could react, the light green light film in front of him became more and more solid. As a lot of magic power poured into Seal's body, the light green light film began to gradually turn dark green. Just as Seal was about to stand up, the dark green light film began to flash rapidly. Before Sha'ur understood what was going on, 2 large dark purple snakes flew out from the light film, intertwined with each other and rushed towards the pacing leopard. Poison sac leopard seemed to know that these 2 dark purple snakes were not easy to mess with. When the snakes first appeared, they turned around and fled upstairs without hesitation. But it is a pity that the agility of the fastest cat on the ground failed to save it this time, and the 2 large snakes were faster than the venomous leopard. At the moment when the venomous leopard rushed to the stairs, the 2 big snakes had opened their mouths and leaked huge fangs, biting on the body of the venomous leopard. For a while, the two big snakes and the venomous leopard started on the stairs, constantly rolling and fighting. The poison sac leopard wanted to escape the bite of the big snake, and only wanted to escape for his life, but the two deep purple snakes were not afraid of death. After a while, the originally mighty poison sac leopard slowly became unable to struggle, and little by little the poison sac leopard became less inhaled and more out of breath. Just after the poison sac leopard was completely dead, the two deep purple snakes instantly turned into a pool of liquid and fell on the stairs, making a creaking sound. In just a short while, the wooden stairs that were originally just broken were riddled with corrosion and collapsed with a coax, and then the light green light film on Ciel's body disappeared. The necklace around his neck also stopped the supply of magic power, and everything seemed like it had never happened. If it wasn't for the dead body of the leopard lying on the top of the stairs, Ciel would have thought it was all a dream. Just when Ciel was wondering, a huge sense of exhaustion flooded into Ciel's brain. At the last moment of losing consciousness, Ciel saw Newt appear in his field of vision, and his mind was full of strange things just now. The scene Ciel sighed that he seemed to have awakened Genji's ultimate move, and then lost consciousness. When Ciel woke up again, the corners of his mouth twitched when he looked at the strange ceiling. Is this the first time? Ciel always wondered if he should get a VIP in a hospital or something, or get some kind of medical insurance. He went to the hospital more often than Harry had to go once a semester, so Ciel was a little worried. Own wallet. Closing his eyes, Ciel recalled what happened before he fainted. Ciel couldn't help but feel that he was a little stupid at the time. If he wanted to die, he had a samurai sword by his side. When the two big snakes appeared, he would be able to call out a gay man. Open my pants chain, I guess I can be handsome enough to be a group of little fans. Just when Ciel was immersed in his own YY and couldn't extricate himself, the door of the room opened, and the person who came in was actually Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked at Charles lying on the bed and said with a smile, I know you have a lot of questions to ask, I'll start with some unimportant ones. This is Mr. Newt's house. After inspection, you just have some magic power. Not enough. Well, Charles, do you have anything to tell me? Ciel gave his teacher a gigantic white eye, and the good old man will answer him when he spends a long time with him. Dumbledore didn't care about Ciel's appearance. He just sat on the bed with a smile and waited for Ciel's narration. Of course, Ciel couldn't keep it. He also wanted to know how to have a gay guy open my pants. Completed, so I told Dumbledore what happened after Newt left. Dumbledore did not interrupt Ciel, but just listened quietly. After listening to Ciel's description, Dumbledore rubbed his temples and said to Ciel, Charles, do you know? I went to see the poison sac. The leopard's body. It is amazing that the poison sac leopard was poisoned by its own poison. After Dumbledore finished speaking, Ciel's eyes widened in surprise, and he was poisoned to death by his own poison. This may be the most embarrassing leopard that has ever died. Seeing Ciel's appearance, Dumbledore said with a smile, don't be surprised, there is a certain amount of everything. If it exceeds this amount, even the water we drink will kill people. Dumbledore paused and then said, Charles, I checked your body when you were in a coma. According to your description, I made a bold guess. It seems that Mr. Slytherin did not just seal you elemental magic, and he left you with life-saving magic. It was Dumbledore who said that. This pointed to the necklace that Ciel hid under his clothes and continued, I checked the seal that Slytherin put on you, and the seal was loose and weakened, in other words, something like this. The absolute protection of the level, you still have a chance, I have studied the seal, even if you break the seal, Mr. Slytherin will give you a chance to save your life. Quote. Ciel's eyes lit up when he heard this. What is this? The existence of resurrection coins +1, what else can I say? Ciel can only say that Mr. Slytherin is really interesting. Ciel, who got the benefits, was obviously in a much better mood. Seeing his teacher was also very happy, Ciel asked a little arrogantly, Teacher, did you come to see me on purpose? Dumbledore froze when he heard Ciel's words, and then smiled happily, It's not, little Ciel, I came to Paris to deal with some things, just come and see if you have a problem. After speaking, Dumbledore stood up and walked out. When he was about to approach the door, Dumbledore seemed to remember something, turned and said to Seal with a smile. "By the way, when you recover a little, remember to comfort Mr. Newt well. Because of your injury, Mr. Newt is still blaming himself, feeling that he can't face you. Okay, I'm leaving, take good care of yourself. Oh little Charles." After speaking, Dumbledore stepped out of Ciel's room, leaving Seal alone in the room, staring at the empty door for a long time, speechless. "By the way, how am I going to eat?" It took a long time for Seal to weakly ask this sentence. Chapter 143 I planted this tree. Although Seal complained so much, Newt definitely couldn't let Seal starve so much. For the sake of the old man, he didn't know who had borrowed a house elf to take care of Seal. As for Newt himself, he is still elusive. The only difference is that the two people who had planned to capture the escaped magical animals became Newt alone. And it is especially important to pick the ones with higher risk factors to be arrested first. Like some poisonous horned beasts, Newt went to arrest them alone. If Seal hadn't cried, made trouble, and hanged himself, he would have repeatedly reassured in front of Newt that it wasn't Newt's fault, and even specifically explained that he and Slytherin's father's protection. Of course, Newt wasn't that easy to fool. The cautious Newt had to confirm with Dumbledore again before he was relieved. Of course, the final result was neither good nor bad. Although Seal succeeded in winning Newt's teaching time again, he should never even think about dangerous creatures like the poison sac leopard. At most, take Seal to catch some harmless small animals. Because of this, Seal has been depressed for a long time. Of course, there are not people who are not happy. The only one who is more happy is Miranda, who has exclusive on-site teaching for Newt, which is not something everyone can have. Although Newt rarely explained compared to when Seal was there, he basically determined the target, used tricks, and then successfully captured it. It was simple and fast, but this process also taught Miranda, who did not have much contact with magical animals, to learn quite a few, or the same sentence, as an aspiring wizard, no one will dislike the knowledge they have. Miranda was cool, but Seal was by no means so happy. This flamboyant woman visited Seal once and boasted about her experience with Newt in front of Seal. At first, Seal didn't want to pay attention to this woman, but he couldn't hold back the feeling that this woman had awakened some kind of nasty taste. He always came to show off to Seal because he had nothing to do after get off work. Expression. Once or twice is enough. The third time, Charles noticed something was wrong. After Miranda started his daily show, Charles grabbed the French Ministry of Magic and did not do well, causing him to be seriously injured and scolded fiercely. This nasty woman has come to a big showdown from consciousness, from legislation to system. In the end, of course, Seal won a big victory. Seeing Miranda's face flushed with anger, and the back of fleeing, Seal kept sneering in his heart, and shouted the teacher's sayings forever God. Of course, Ciel's boring days didn't last long. Thanks to the necklace around his neck, Seal was already alive and kicking on the 5th day. Early the next morning, Seal was ready to go, standing at the door waiting for Newt. Looking at the excited Seal at the door, Newt shook his head helplessly, and silently complained that it was love. The adventurous Gryffindor didn't say anything after that. After confirming again and again with Seal that Slytherin is still guarded by Seal and that he is not afraid of any danger, he decided to continue his adventure with Seal, and generously expressed that he could let Seal operate, and he was in the guide Charles later. Hearing this, Charles felt very excited. According to the French Ministry of Magic official, the poison sac leopard is already the most dangerous existence among the imported magical animals, and the others are relatively gentle, magical animals. Therefore, Miranda's cooperation task has basically been completed. But what Seal didn't know was that Newt had already completed most of the dangerous magical beast captures that the Ministry of Magic couldn't handle while Seal was in bed at home. As for the rest, they are basically some relatively dangerous magical animals. In other words, if a wizard who doesn't know how to deal with these magical animals, it is basically a win-win situation. But if you know how to do it, there are magical creatures that muggles with no magic power can easily subdue. So, when Charles, led by Newt, was in a small alley behind a supermarket in Paris, facing two tails with two faint blue flames on them, the frightened cat endured the corners of his mouth couldn't stop twitching. So, this is the very dangerous magical animal you're talking about. Seal couldn't hold back, and pointed to the kitten in front of him who was constantly protesting against him and said to Newt, "After all, this thing looks like an adult domestic cat. Size." Of course. Newt nodded confidently. Cats are the pets of the god of death in the mythology of Area 11, and in fact cats are indeed very dangerous. Their attacks can directly attack the soul, scratched thousands of times in one place. It can really scratch the soul, and the flame on the tail can also burn the soul. A year or two on the head can make the soul feel a little hot. In the end, under the encouragement of Newt, with a suspicious face, Charles successfully subdued the poor kitten with a can of cat food and a cat. Fortunately, because she knew that Hermione would buy Crookshanks as a pet on her birthday, she prepared all the pet supplies as gifts in advance. I didn't expect that Crookshanks hadn't enjoyed it yet, so I gave it to this one who doesn't know hungry. It took a long time for the kitten to use it again. The most important thing is that Seal didn't use Newt to make a sound during the whole process. He just took it out and tried it out because of his self-consciousness as a meow control. I didn't expect it to be successful. When Seal came to Newt with the cat that had already eaten and drank a book full of content and was coquettish in Seal's arms, and faced with Newt's kindly smiling face, Seal couldn't help but retaliate. Just this expression. Of course, Newt didn't say anything. He just smiled and said to Seal that you are very talented. Seal didn't know why Newt always felt that he was bullying him for not studying enough. The two of them put the coquettish kitten in a special cage and covered it with a black cloth. At first, the little guy was reluctant to leave the arms of the good man Seal who fed him, but when the black cloth as soon as the cage was closed, the little guy fell asleep in seconds. Seal looked at this cute little guy with some doting. No matter how he looked at this little thing, it wasn't like what Newt said. He glanced helplessly at Newt, who was still trying to maintain his kindness, and turned to take the lead to leave the alley. Seeing that Seal didn't care, Newt couldn't care less about maintaining it, and quickly followed Seal's pace. After all, Seal was recovering from a serious illness, so it's better to follow this little ancestor. But just before the two had walked a few steps, a person suddenly appeared at the entrance of the alley in front. Looking at Charles and Newt, the two in broad daylight immediately recognized that this person was the man who gave Miranda a knife. Just as the two of them took out their wands vigilantly and were about to retreat while fighting, a man appeared behind them, and it was the man who treated Miranda. Seeing that the back road was blocked, both of them had a bad premonition in their hearts. Just as the two of them were on guard nervously to prevent the enemy from suddenly attacking, and the atmosphere gradually became anxious, the man standing at the entrance of the alley with a sullen face suddenly with a loud roar, "I planted this tree and opened this road. If you want to cross this road, leave the cage in your hand." The point is, he is also trilingual in Chinese, French and English. Chapter 144-Confrontation. Both Seal and Newt looked at the man who had a vicious face, but shouted such funny words, and even the man who cut off their back path looked at the man at the entrance of the alley with disgust. The tense atmosphere disappeared for a while, and finally the person who cut the back road spoke first. "Two, I wonder if you can put down the cage in your hands. Some are uncomfortable." Newt didn't care what the man said, and protected Seal against the wall. Fortunately, the alley was spacious enough that Newt was confident that he could quickly apparate away with Seal. But when Newt wanted to take Seal away, no matter how Newt activated the magic, he couldn't activate apparition, which made Newt's face a lot darker, and it was obvious that the two had made preparations to prevent apparition. Newt was still thinking about what to do on the other side, and the man at the entrance of the alley on the other side spoke again. "Old man, I advise you to hand it over honestly, so as not to suffer from flesh and blood." Although the man spoke, Newt didn't know what he said, because the man spoke Cantonese, and Newt couldn't understand it at all, but he looked at the man's sinister face, and thought of stabbing Miranda. Without hesitation, Newt decided to strike first. Lowered his head and said to Seal in a low voice, "Wait, I will try my best to open the alley for you. You can find a way to rush out, and then go to the Ministry of Magic for support, you know." After he finished speaking, he raised his hand and shot a magic spell out without waiting for Seal to reply. On Seal's side, when he heard the Cantonese of the man at the entrance of the alley, Seal was thinking hard about what the man was talking about. "Unfamiliar, the only thing I know is the Cantonese songs." When Shire was talking about lose, Newt had already rushed out. "Newt," the man took a sip with disdain, and muttered softly, "Cut, can't communicate." The magic flew away, and then he fought with Newt in front of him. Shire held the cat cage and watched the battle with some nervousness, while cautiously looking at the middle-aged man behind his back. The middle-aged man sighed helplessly and then whispered, "This unlucky boy, call him good. I learned a foreign language, and this sentence was taught to me as a result." Quote. Then the young man raised his hand and pinched a few orders, and then his eyes flashed with gold, and he looked suspiciously at the black-haired and blue-eyed Char who looked like an elves in Western mythology. "People from the Celestial Dynasty." This sentence was spoken in Chinese. For a while, Shah-Ur was in a daze. Time travel was the biggest secret in Shah-Ur's life, but it was easily figured out by the middle-aged man in front of him. "Who are you?" Seal swears that at this time he is ready to use black magic, and even if he pollutes his soul, he will never know what he has transmigrated. The middle-aged man didn't take offense when he saw Shah-Ur's appearance, but politely gave Shah-Ur a salute. "Pindao Zhongjue, a little bit of fortune-telling. I just learned that your excellency is from the background. People of the Celestial Dynasty, I hope your excellency Haihan." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Shah-Ur did not relax his vigilance. He still pointed at the middle-aged man and couldn't help but wrinkle his brows deeply. "I'm asking again, who are you and what else do you know?" Seeing Shah-Ur's vigilant appearance, the middle-aged man was relieved, and he didn't doubt that he had made a mistake. He clasped his fists and saluted and replied, "Pindao Zhongjue is a disciple of Zhengyi. This time it is entrusted by someone to come to your place to find a lost beast of the heaven. As for the others, don't worry, layman, the practice of the poor way is still shallow, and you can't really see anything. This is already the limit of the poor way." Quote. Charles was a little worried, and asked suspiciously, "Is it gone?" Middle-aged man was not surprised at all, and replied, "It's really gone. The layman has great fortune, and trying to forcibly observe the death of your lord's anger is considered light, not to mention that the poor Taoist is only rudimentary in this divination and fortune-telling method." Quote. Hearing this, Seal felt a little relieved. He really didn't want anyone to know that he was going through this. Looking at the kind middle-aged man in front of him, he thought that he was the one who saved Milan in the end. Only then did Dashar let go of his vigilance. Looking back at Newt, who was still fighting, he saw that Newt was being beaten by the man with the ruthless face. In fact, it was not Newt's fault. When a mage moved in the alley, he was able to get close to a man. It's not easy for a master to fight now, not to mention that Newt is still walking in the summoning stream, and every now and then, a magical animal will jump out to give the ruthless person a sudden hit. Seeing that Newt and that man did not suffer any losses, Seal was completely relieved, looking at Zhongjue opposite him and said, "What the hell is going on, and since you are here to find Zouwu, why? Will it hurt Miranda?" Zhongjue was not angry when confronted by Shah-Ur's questioning, and replied in a flat tone, "Pindao is really entrusted to find Zouwu. This Zouwu seems to know about his father's previous adventures in a foreign country. In addition to being young, the first time I used the ability, I lost my way, so the people who came here are only those who came here to look for it according to the hexagram." Quote. Zhongjue paused for a while and then said, "As for the Miranda you mentioned, we really don't know each other, but the reckless man on the opposite side did attack a woman because we saw this woman kill a group of ordinary people who were cursed. Thinking that the woman might be going to attack our Zouwu, that hurt her, but later found out that the cage was not the Zouwu we were looking for." Quote. After Zhongjue finished speaking, Seal immediately remembered that in Miranda's memory, he had indeed seen that thing that made his sanity drop, and Miranda had indeed killed that thing. According to Miranda, the degree of integration has indeed been to the point where there is no cure. Out of humanitarianism, Miranda moved her hand. Thinking of this, Shire suddenly found a bright spot. Wait, you mean, in the Celestial Dynasty, do you have a way to curse at that level? Zhang Jiwei had some doubts about CL's question, but he still answered CL's question. Although it is impossible to fully recover, there are many sects of cultivation techniques in the Celestial Dynasty, and it is really not difficult to cure a fusion curse. When CL heard this, he was a little surprised and couldn't close his mouth. Should he immediately abandon the magic and go to the Celestial Dynasty to try it? What should it be called? Practicing martial arts or cultivating immortals? P.S. The intrusion under one person is just the author's bad taste, because the bad taste is caused by seeing Snape and Dumbledore in the animation under one person. Without too much plot, the protagonist will also be a pure HP magic system. There is no one person in the protagonist's world who is under this anime, so the protagonist doesn't know that Zhang Jiwei is the old master, just like this. Chapter 145-Tang Sect. Newt, Hidden Weapon, Shire. When Shire heard Zhang Jiwei's words, he was a little suspicious of life. He couldn't hold back his inner curiosity, and couldn't help asking the question that he had buried in his heart since he saw Miranda's memory. What the hell is going on with you? It's not a magic system, is it martial arts or immortal cultivation? Why is there such a big gap with our magic? And are you from HK? Zhang Jiwei was not angry, he just laughed when he heard CL's question. The layman is joking, we are not ordinary chi practitioners, strictly speaking, we should be considered martial arts practitioners. As for why the gap is so big, I think it is probably because of the vast territory. The dialects vary from place to place. Oh, speaking in dialects, the next one can speak Cantonese. Life and death are fate, wealth and honor are in the sky, or the boy on the opposite side will teach them. Quote. After finishing speaking, he gestured with his chin to the person who was fighting with Newt, and then continued, as for Pindao, they are from Longhu Mountain. Hearing Zhang Jiwei's answer, although I don't read much, I still feel that you are fooling me again. He frowned and looked at Zhang Jiwei with a puzzled expression. On the surface, Shire did not refute. But I was constantly complaining in my heart, this bull-nose is also fooling me for fear of death. Huh, why should I say it again? Although Shire didn't say anything on the surface, Zhang Jiwei clearly saw Shire's doubts and continued, the layman doesn't seem to believe it very much, so let's give an example. After he finished speaking, he thought about the not-so-long beard on his chin, and then said, take the little red beam of light that you often use as an example. Translated into Chinese, it should be a weapon to kill you, right? But this sentence is not it's easy to say. People in Beijing may say that it's something other than you, but Tianjin, which is not far from Beijing, still has these words, but the pronunciation may be completely different. Quote. Zhang Jiwei thought for a while and then said to Shire, in our place, only a small number of people use the spirit of words, and generally speaking, there are very few words. Shire was stunned for a moment when Zhang Jiwei's words fell, and his mind was full of Zhang Jiwei's words except you. But in the end, Shire still couldn't control himself and couldn't help laughing wildly while holding his stomach. This smile made the two Newt, who were fighting fiercely, stop and look at the hilarious Seal, not to mention the smiling Zhang Jiwei. The three of them were a little puzzled, especially Zhang Jiwei, who had no idea why Seal laughed like this. Furious. Only Shire knew about this, and only Shire had read the Chinese translation of Harry Potter. So he was the only one who knew how funny Zhang Jiwei's translation of the weapon except you was. Looking at Seal who was laughing wildly, Newt didn't understand what was going on. He thought that Seal had received some unknown attack, but thinking of the super protection on Seal, Newt was also a little relieved. The ruthless-looking man who had been fighting against Newt couldn't help but be curious. What the hell are you doing? My lord, I'm having a good time. Why are you making jokes with people? Hearing that person's words, Zhang Jiwei also shook his head helplessly. Meow Fu, Pindao doesn't know why this little layman is smiling like this. And, if you don't mind calling me Big Brother, if you fight, you'll be called Pindao Niubi. Is it time to change the habit? When Meow Fu heard Zhang Jiwei's words, he didn't care whether Newt, who was still stupefied on the surface, would attack, and gave Zhang Jiwei an international friendly gesture. It's not a good person who disturbs the young master's battle. Hey, foreign old man, let's continue. Newt, who heard Meow Fu's words, didn't understand what the other party was saying, and Meow Fu didn't bother to attack the old man who was still stunned on the surface, but just stood there on guard. As for Newt, the old man is not just stunned, looking at the hilarious seal, although Newt doesn't know why Seal is like this, but Newt suddenly thought of a dangerous tactic. As far as Seal safely sent out the encirclement to look for support, it was worth a try, and maybe he could even directly kill these two people who didn't know where they came from. Thinking of this, Newt decided to give it a try. After all, Seal was always on Newt's mind, so he might as well give it a try. So Newt looked at Seal, who couldn't stop laughing, and decided to act decisively. I saw Newt stretched out his wand and pointed at Seal, and Seal, who was still laughing, immediately felt that something was wrong, and then I saw Newt waved his wand and used Seal as a hidden weapon. After offering sacrifices, the target was Meow Fu, who was on guard. Zhang Jiwei was obviously unable to be dealt with by Newt's teammates. Then he became furious and shouted, "Piffle dare!" Golden light flashed all over his body and he was about to grab it and fly in midair, still stunned. Stupid Charles. Even Meow Fu was stunned by Newt's operation. Seeing Seal flying over, followed by a golden and furious Zhang Jiwei behind him, Meow Fu was also in a state of oblivion. After a while, the big brother will be bull-nosed. If we really want to talk about it, Zhang Jiwei can do it. Meow Fu repeatedly rubs on the ground. The helpless Meow Fu could only reduce his strength in an attempt to catch Seal and return Seal to Zhang Jiwei, but fate often likes to make jokes with everyone. Meow Fu's hesitation made his movements a little slower. But coincidentally, he and Zhang Jiwei met Sha-Er. The difference was that Meow Fu gently dragged Sha-Er's back, while Zhang Jiwei's body turned into a golden rope and wrapped around Sha-Er's ankle, trying to hold Charles. But what the two of them didn't expect was that at the moment when the power of the two people just touched the body of Seal, Seal seemed to become a bottomless black hole, madly devouring the power of the two people. At the same time, the light green light film on Seal appeared again, but this time it was much faster than last time, but in the blink of an eye, the light green light film already had a dark green shadow. Not to mention Zhang Jiwei, when Meow Fu came into contact with the black hole-like suction of Sha-Er, he immediately secretly said that it was not good. According to this situation, sooner or later, he would be sucked into an adult and shouted, "Big brother, save me." Zhang Jiwei was also unequivocal. When he found out that something was not right, he immediately cut off the golden rope on Sha-Er's feet, turned around and popped out a small golden ball that knocked Meow Fu out and saved Meow Fu's life. After a few flips, he came to the entrance of the alley at a very fast speed to catch Meow Fu, watching Newt and Seal in the ball of light with a wary expression. Everyone in the audience was on guard. No one had ever seen Seal like this, but Seal, who was in the ball of light, was crying and screaming from the bottom of his heart, "Old Newt, wasted my shot." Resurrection coins. Chapter 146_misunderstanding resolved. Everyone at this time didn't dare to act rashly. Who didn't know what was going on the side of Seal, and even Seal didn't understand. The only difference between this time and the last encounter with the leopard was the light green. The light film actually didn't absorb a lot of Seal's magic power, and at the same time, it didn't show aggression like last time. For a time, the atmosphere fell into an embarrassing situation of honey, especially the Seal. At this time, the Seal was confined in place by the green light film. The Seal tried to move, but unfortunately, it was not possible. At this time, the Seal it's like being in a restricted hamster ball. Zhang Jiwei looked at the situation at the scene, especially the teammates who fell to the ground. His brows could not help frowning. As the first person, he did not understand Newt's way of throwing Seal out. After all, in the East, the saying of respecting the old and loving the young has been deeply rooted in the bone marrow. Even if it is in danger, a righteous person will not push a child out to block the sword. So naturally, Zhang Jiwei has determined that Newt is not a good person, and it is very likely that his little fellow is being coerced. Thinking of this, Zhang Jiwei's body surface once again has a strong golden light. He has decided, yes, it's time to take action, and the celestial master should not be soft on the wicked. Newt also discovered that Seal couldn't move. This situation also made Newt sweat profusely. The expected situation of using the guardian magic left by Slytherin to overthrow the two did not happen. Knowing why, it has become a cage that limits Seal's combat power. At this time, Newt couldn't help laughing bitterly in his heart, but the escape method he had planned didn't work. I hope that the two of them can let Seal go when Seal is still a child, and the middle-aged man had all the laughter just now. Although Newt doesn't want to admit it, Newt, who is not proficient in attacking magic, can't really beat the two of them, and even Meowfu, who fell to the ground, might have been beaten by these proficient close-quarters fights in a few times without the help of his little cuties. The good hand lay down on the ground. Thinking of this, the corners of Newt's mouth curled into a wry smile, and he glanced at Seal, who was still in the tortoise shell. Seeing that the middle-aged man on the opposite side began to glow golden light all over, Newt began to instigate his own magic power, just like a gust of wind under his feet, blowing Newt's silver-white hair. Shatter felt that the atmosphere was a bit wrong for some reason. From the embarrassment of honey juice, he began to become sluggish. Looking at Zhang Jiwei, whose body was glowing with golden light, Shatter saved that this compatriot must have misunderstood something. Stop it, stop it. Seal frantically motioned the two of them to stop in the green light film. After all, Seal seemed to have misunderstood. If this misunderstanding ended up causing everyone to die or die, then the fun would be great. Although Seal was in a hurry and shouted at his throat, it was obvious that the two of them outside didn't hear anything. Seal also found out about this situation, and felt that Newt was starting to vibrate his own magic power outside, and Seal secretly thought to himself, well, depending on the posture of the two, it is definitely a distinction between life and death. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, asterisk 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 asterisk, how can this scumbag disappear? Shatter muttered anxiously. Too much the anxious Seal has begun to speak his native language, which is a classic in his life. Just when Seal was in a hurry, he didn't know whether the light curtain understood the fragrance of Seal's mouth like a telegram, or it was true that he had not been damaged by external forces, and it began to fade a little bit. Shatter immediately discovered this situation, and Shatter didn't know what the reason was, but Shatter knew that as long as he continued to maintain this state, the bastard would definitely disappear on his own. This is a race against time. Seal didn't dare to delay too much, and regardless of whether it was his mouth-spitting fragrance that played a role, as long as it was maintained. So Seal began to be alone in the large telegraph scene in the light curtain, and he searched for the Yin and Yang family who had experienced the information explosion in the previous life, the gang family, and the street faction. Not a single drop, not a single word. Seen from a distance like this, where are the two masters fighting at the top of the Forbidden City, and in the green orb as the winner's reward, there is still someone in it who is frantically sending telegrams. No matter what happened to Seal in it, Zhang Jiwei and Newt were all focused on each other at this time anyway. Their momentum gradually reached the highest level, and they both moved in an instant. Zhang Jiwei threw out a long whip of golden light and rushed towards Newt. At the same time, he also turned sideways to avoid the spell that Newt fired. Newt was not ambiguous. Years of combat experience made him the first to set out to avoid Zhang Jiwei's throw. The golden whip that came over also raised his hand and threw out a few red spells. Just as the two attacks were about to meet, Seal finally came out of the light film that was slowly fading. Seeing that both were attacking each other, Seal couldn't care about anything else for a while. Stop it all! A roar came out of Seal's throat, and even used a loud voice when Seal didn't realize it. The loud noise surprised both of them. Fortunately, both of them are experienced veterans. They made the same action for a while. Zhang Jiwei immediately dispersed the whip when he heard the roar, and so did Newt. The extreme control forced the already launched spell to turn a corner and slammed into the wall. Seeing that the two stopped, Seal angrily trotted all the way to stand between them, and began to try to resolve the misunderstanding. "Mr. Newt, don't be nervous, they're not enemies, it's all a misunderstanding. They're here to find Zuwu," Seal said to Newt in English. He turned to Zhang Jue and said in Chinese, "Don't be nervous, Mr. Zhang Jue, this Mr. Newt is my teacher's friend, a magical zoologist, not an enemy." When the two heard Seal's words, they both looked at each other suspiciously, but they did not continue to act. After a long time, Zhang Jue was the first to put down his guard. "I just mistakenly thought that you were the villain who kidnapped this child. Offended, but also hope not to blame." Of course it was spoken in Chinese. Newt looked at Seal with a bewildered expression. He had no idea what the man who was the enemy just said. Zhang Jue also looked at Sha-Er. The meaning was obvious. Sha-Er sighed slightly. It seems that his identity as a tool person is absolutely impossible to escape. After Seal translated Zhang Jue's words, Newt couldn't help blushing, scratching his head and answering a little embarrassedly, "It's okay, it's my fault, the disease machine has gone to the doctor." Newt wouldn't admit that he couldn't beat the two and tried to use Seal's resurrection coins to break out of the siege. Chapter 147-Newt Who Stole Zuwu. After the misunderstanding between the two is resolved, it will be much more convenient to do things, not to mention that there is a human flesh translation machine like Sha-Er, and communication is even more barrier-free. In this way, the two waves of people turned around in the Shire and began their friendly first international exchange. After knowing that Newt was a famous miraculous biologist throughout Europe, Zhang Jue revealed an expression of interest and introduced himself to Newt. "Hello, I am the contemporary celestial master of Longhu Mountain. My name is Zhang Jue. The reason why I came here this time is because I was asked by the National Department of Protection of Magical Animals to come and find our beast cubs that have been lost for a long time." Quote. After Seal finished translating, Newt asked Seal in a low voice with curiosity, "Charles, do you know what a celestial master is?" Seal rolled his eyes and said in his heart how he knew, but thinking about the vast terrain of his motherland, he didn't know how many British sizes it was. So he said with some uncertainty, "There is a high probability that the Celestial Master is equal to my teacher, right?" Newt was shocked when he heard this, and couldn't help but secretly rejoice that he didn't do it just now. Otherwise, according to the player opposite Dumbledore, he would have died unless he was holding two dragons. Do not know at all. Thinking of this, Newt secretly touched the non-existent cold sweat, and said to Zhang Jue with a smile, "Hello. My name is Newt, Newt Scamander. Can you describe the beast you are talking about in detail, or maybe you can tell me what it's called? To tell you the truth, we're also catching some lost magical animals." Zhang Jue was not so surprised by Newt's words. After all, Zhang Jue had seen many people in the streets and alleys avoiding crowds and arresting some strange creatures. "The last time I witnessed an invisible evil beast eating a human heart. Although I warned Meow Fu not to take action at that time, so as not to cause disaster out of thin air, but in the end I still couldn't get over my inner demon, and after Meow Fu rested in the middle of the night, I go out secretly and kill the evil beast that eats people's hearts." Thinking of this, Zhang Jue stopped hiding and said directly to Sha-Er, 50 years ago, our country once lost a beast, Zuwu, according to the investigation of the National Department of Protection of Magical Animals at that time. Someone secretly kidnapped our nationally protected magical animals. Quote. Zhang Jue paused for a moment and seemed to be a little sad, and then said, "At that time, we were in chaos at home and abroad, and there was a big incident among us people, so it's a pity that we didn't have the extra patience to find this one. The stolen Zuwu. But fortunately, after just a few years, this Zuwu actually came back by himself. After inquiries from our expert in the beast control sect, we learned that this Zuwu came back by himself with the help of one person. We didn't care too much. Until a few years ago, this Zuwu also gave birth to a cub, but because the baby was too noisy, this Zuwu who just became a father actually told the little Zuwu that he was stolen back then later story. Because Zuwu has the ability to teleport in space, this little Zuwu also wants to imitate his father to have a great adventure. Finally, On a night that no one noticed, Xiaozuwu activated the ability that he had just mastered and was not very skilled. After many mistakes, Xiaozuwu disappeared in our protected area. After the staff found out that Xiaozuwu had disappeared, the staff of the Department of Protection of Magical Animals immediately conducted an investigation. The comrades of the Beast Control sect even asked Xiaozuwu's parents overnight. After confirming the news, we immediately came to the UK. But when we arrived at the scene, we found that Xiaozuwu had been kidnapped, so we could only infer that it was here based on the hexagram, so, as you can see, the two of us came here. After he finished speaking, he did not forget to point to Miaofu, who was still on the ground. Sha-Er glanced at Miaofu, who was still lying on the ground foaming. For a while, he didn't know whether to sympathize with this big HK man or to translate Zhang Jiwei's words first. Do you want to help? Sha-Er pointed at Miaofu with some uncertainty and asked. Zhang Jiwei calmly waved his hand to signal it was okay, and asked Sha-Er to translate what he just said. Seal always wondered if this was a little bad, but he honestly translated what Zhang Jiwei said to Newt. Who knew that Newt pointed directly at Zhang Jiwei and spit out fragrance after listening, fart. I'm not stealing. I saw Zhou appeared in the British territory and obviously felt abnormal, so I decided to take it first and see can you find a partner for him. If I can't find it, I will send it back. I don't call it kidnapping. Seeing Newt's angry look, Zhang Jiwei didn't know why Newt was angry but just watched Seal waiting for his translation, and Seal was a little embarrassed. What about my relationship? That's right, if it wasn't for Seal pestering Old Deng for Fox, and Old Deng wouldn't ask Newt to help Seal find a pet, these garbled things wouldn't have happened. Thinking of this, Seal can't help but have a headache. What kind of human suffering is this? Newt's words certainly couldn't be fully translated, so Seal focused on reasoning, and slowly told Zhang Jiwei the whole story. Zhang Jiwei was a little angry at first. When Sha-Er was willing to find Xiaozuwu and return it, Zhang Jiwei suddenly felt that this child was also a very reasonable person. Coupled with the sky highlight of the interior scene just now, Zhang Jiwei suddenly felt that it was not impossible for Xiaozuwu to be fostered with Shi for a period of time, but it all depends on Xiaozuwu's choice. Finally, when Charles said that Newt did rescue an adult Zuwu in Paris, France more than 50 years ago, the two groups of people discovered that fate was indeed a destiny. Who would have thought that something that happened more than 50 years ago would still continue to happen today? After confirming the identities of the two parties, the two waves of people suddenly became enthusiastic. Newt is actually a very simple person. As long as the other side is also a protector of magical animals, then Newt doesn't care whether he has any misunderstanding with the person on the other side. As for Zhang Jiwei, as a Taoist priest, he believes in the relationship between cause and effect and reincarnation, and he doesn't care much about these trivial matters. So a very miraculous scene happened again. The two of them were chatting very enthusiastically with Seal between them. As for Seal, he was just a ruthless translation machine. It wasn't until a weak voice sounded that interrupted the happy communication between the two. Cough, cough, I said, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think I can save you. Chapter 148 _ the First East-West Cultural Exchange Summit. Hearing Miaofu's cry for help, Seal and Newt hurried forward to help him up, but Miaofu saw Seal walking towards him, followed by a Newt with an unnatural expression. For a while, the memory of just now flooded into my mind. Under the strong desire to survive, Miaofu, who was completely weak and foaming, forced himself to stand up, and refused to contact Seal and Newt, and came directly beside Zhang Jiwei. Old Heavenly Master, save me. Miaofu hid directly beside the Heavenly Master and refused to leave half a step. Zhang Jiwei was very funny about Miaofu's performance. Seeing Miaofu's bearish appearance, he smiled and said, Okay, Miaofu, you usually call me eldest brother. Call me the Celestial Master. Hearing Zhang Jiwei's words, Miaofu was in a cold sweat. Don't, it's just a joke. God, I really don't have a drop now. I'm even more ordinary than an ordinary person. If you don't save me, isn't that filling your heart with demons? Meow-Fu dragged his injured body, wiped away the foam from the corners of his mouth, and looked at Zhang Jiwei as if to please him. Zhang Jiwei was also unambiguous, and after educating Meow-Fu that there are people outside the world, there are heavens, and then let Meow-Fu go. At this time, Seal had a sudden idea, and without Newt's consent, he directly invited the two to come to Newt's house to recuperate. I want to exchange information with the two of them. After all, Zhang Jiwei and the two are already the three forces looking for this little Zuwu, but the strange thing is that these three forces have nothing to gain, and it stands to reason that this is definitely something strange. Zhang Jiwei also clearly saw Ciel's idea, and he followed suit, but Newt was still a little grumpy. In the end, he agreed to Charles's arrangement. So Shah helped Meow-Fu and the four of them with all their hands and decided to use Muggle transportation to return to Newt's house. It's not that he didn't want to use flow powder, and don't forget that Meow-Fu also stabbed Miranda. It's on Miranda's blacklist. In case of being discovered, it will inevitably be explained again, and Seal said that he refuses to be a tool person. On the other hand, Meow-Fu was still a bit grumpy at this time. Seeing Seal supporting him, Meow-Fu also carefully tried not to drag Seal. After all, the green light film of Seal had absorbed all the anger in his body, and even injured him. A little bit about his origin: although the problem is not big, it will take a long time to recover. Finally, an hour later, under the cover of Newt's magic, the four came to Newt's cabin in France smoothly. Charles was not polite and arranged for Meow-Fu to lie down in his previous treatment room. Newt took over the follow-up treatment consciously. The two were surprised to see the various potions Newt took out. This kind of liquid elixir was rare among them, so the three of them had some exchanges. Unfortunately, it was Newt's not a potion master like Snape. He didn't know much about potions, many of them were bought directly, and many things were made by Mrs. Tina. These are all trivial things. The only thing Newt cares about is that the enemy who was still fighting to death just now became a member of the same faction under the operation of Seal, and even lay in his own treatment room. It made Newt feel a little impermanent in life. Of course, Seal is not idle, this seems to be no problem, but the three forces can't find the target, so Seal is very keen to smell a conspiracy, so Seal is not polite, thinking of himself. The teacher was still working in France a few days ago, and should not leave now. Seal stood at the door and started shouting Fox's name again and again, expecting that Uncle Fox could sense his call by virtue of his master-disciple relationship with Dumbledore. In the end, Fox really didn't fall off the chain. During Ciel's third call, Fox appeared in front of Seal accompanied by the flames. If it wasn't for the look of contempt that Seal was familiar with, Seal would have no choice. Once again move the mind under the ignorance of Fox. In the end, Seal still wrote a letter to Fox about what happened recently, especially what happened today, and asked Fox to deliver it as soon as possible after paying countless small dried fish that originally belonged to Crookshanks. After receiving the benefits, Fox still handled things very neatly. After a while, Dumbledore would appear in the living room of Newt's house with Fox along with the flames. After learning the general situation from Ciel's mouth, Dumbledore also frowned and felt a little wrong. After thinking of the information sent by his good friend a while ago, Dumbledore's face turned black for a while. It's the same as carbon. After hearing Ciel say that there is another self from the east upstairs, Dumbledore's expression improved a little, and with a hint of interest in his eyes, he asked Ciel to introduce him. Of course Ciel was happy to do such a thing, so Luo generously brought Dumbledore upstairs, preparing to let Zhang Jiwei, Newt and Dumbledore come to an East-West cultural exchange conference. But when Ciel brought Dumbledore into the room, Ciel's face suddenly became bitter. In the room, Newt was gesturing with Zhang Jiwei and Meow-Fu, especially Zhang Jiwei, who was actually a little happy meaning in it. If the three of them were talking, only Ciel would translate, and Ciel estimated that he would not be able to complete this epic communication even if he was tired of turning it over. Fortunately, Dumbledore is more reliable. He raised his hand and placed an unknown spell on Newt and himself. After a short while, the two old Englishmen could start stumblingly and in a weird tone. Communicate continuously. Just looking at this spell, Sha-Er will fall to the ground. Imagine that if you had this spell in your previous life, you wouldn't be able to get 30% in English in the college entrance examination, and failed in college English for 4 years in a row. The three of them couldn't care less about Miao Fu, who was lying on the hospital bed just after drinking the potion, and his facial features were all wrinkled together. Sha-Er was also happy and leisurely. Seeing Miao Fu, who was idle and bored, Sha-Er still couldn't help but leaned over and whispered to Miao Fu, "I said, brother, what are you practicing? Are you from HK? Brother, come and cut me, you know what?" Miao Fu glanced at Seal and didn't understand what Ciel's last sentence meant, but he honestly replied with a non-standard ordinary hair, "I'm from HK, and I only have Bajiquan from my family. My family has something to do with the Heavenly Master, so that I can get involved in this mission to gain knowledge." Quote. After hearing the satisfactory answer and knowing that Miao Fu is a HK practitioner, Sha-Er couldn't help but ask the question he had always wanted to know with anticipation. "Brother Miao Fu, tell the truth, do you know Jackie Chan?" Chapter 149-conspiracy is emerging. Miao Fu never expected that this little foreigner who seemed to be born and raised in front of him not only spoke pure Mandarin Chinese, but also knew some things about the entertainment industry in Hong Kong. At this time, Miao Fu also murmured in his heart, "Is the influence of HK's movies so great at this time?" Miao Fu was a little surprised, but looking at Ciel's expectant look beside the bed, thinking that Feng Zheng was not a secret, he answered Ciel generously. "How should I put it? I do know it. It's my junior brother, but it seems that he didn't continue on the road of learning boxing. He was spotted by a director and went to act." Miao Fu scratched his cheek in embarrassment and replied, "Sha Yu." When Sha-Er heard this, he felt that his eyes were about to light up, and he couldn't help but take off in place. At this time, Sha-Er felt really excited, and he still can't forget his last life when he was a child with his father. On the sofa, both of them were sleepy, but they were still holding on to their spirits, waiting for an appointment for a good movie every Saturday. To be honest, the eldest brother, Zhou Xingxing, the two of them were almost the same two people who lasted through Ciel's entire childhood in his previous life. After a long circle of nostalgia in Sha-Er's head, he was suppressed by a bold idea of his own. Sha-Er was not polite, and immediately turned into a dog and ran to Miao Fu with a flattering expression. "Big brother Miao Fu, you are my big brother. Big brother, please do me a favor, can I ask for an autographed photo?" Quote. A steely tough guy in Miao Fu got goosebumps abruptly because of Ciel's manipulation. Seeing that Sha-Er really wanted a signed photo, Li Miao Fu pushed Sha-Er's close face away. "Well, stay away from me first. Give me an address, and I'll send you an email when I get back." Miao Fu looked at Sha-Er with disgust, and was still complaining about his little junior brother. "The charm of acting in movies, is it really that big? Even children like it so much." Thinking that he is still single, Miao Fu suddenly had the idea of abandoning martial arts and acting. Of course, this thought was only suppressed by Miao Fu just after it came up. If he really did this, he would probably face the double mixed doubles of his master and his father. Thinking of that scene, Miao Fu shuddered. "I do not have a hobby of volleyball." Sha-Er didn't know that these few words made him think like this to the tough guy in front of him. He was so happy that Sha-Er immediately took out a pen from the small box that he kept in his hand and started writing on the balcony. After a while, Sha-Er handed Miao Fu a thick piece of paper. Miao Fu was a little strange at first. Did this kid write a letter to his junior brother? Miao Fu, who took the letter, just glanced at it, and his face began to darken. There was no other reason. What Sha-Er handed to Miao Fu was not a letter, but a list. The name of the eldest brother came first. Page, the second page is Lu Tianwang, the third page is Zhou Xingxing, and then they are all fucking female stars. What Dongfang Unbeaten, Fairy Zixia, Princess Wei Xiaobao, Goddess of Big Mouth, Miss Hong Kong and the like are all in it. Miao Fu looked at the female stars on the list with a dark face like the bottom of a pot. "Stinky boy, do you want the autographed photo of my junior brother or the autographed photo of the female star? By the way, you little brat, want it?" What are so many female star autographs doing? Seal can't handle that much. After all, this is one of the few things that Seal can miss in his previous life. This time, he finally caught a related household. How could Seal let it go? If it weren't for the identity and some other mess, Seal would even want to go back and see if he could mix a photo or something. Oh, don't be angry, isn't it rare for me to catch a related household? If I don't make a lot of money, then there will be another time. Or I will call the female official of the French Ministry of Magic who was stabbed by you. Chatting with you. With a carp-like look on his face, Seal picked his nostrils indifferently and said to Meow Fu, who was lying on the bed. Meow Fu had a black line on his face at this time. If there was a comic here, a black shadow with sharp teeth and a sharp mouth might have jumped out from behind Meow Fu at this time, and he would give him a good beating. Crazy Tucow, please respect your appearance. No need to donate to those in need. But these are just what Meow Fu thought about. Seeing Sha'er set himself up, Meow Fu gritted his back molars and replied, "Okay, I will contact junior brother, you, don't worry." When Sha'er heard this, he regained his charming elf appearance, and said to Meow Fu with a very polite smile, "Then I'll ask you, uncle. By the way, the address is on the last page, uncle must hurry up and reply to me." Quote. After he finished speaking, Seal didn't care about Meow Fu, who was in doubt about his life situation on the bed, and jumped out happily. HK soon. Famous martial arts stars asked for autographed photos of many female stars everywhere. We will talk about this later. Big Brother fans don't hit me, believe me, I'm Big Brother big fan too. After Sha'er slapped Meow Fu, he walked out of the door of the treatment room happily, but as soon as he left, Sha'er felt his feet off the ground, and the whole person seemed to be caught by fate. The neck flew towards the study at a glance. After a while, Seal sat down in front of the three bosses who had just shifted their positions. Watching Dumbledore slowly put away his old wand, Seal felt that the happy mood just now disappeared. "My dear master, is that what you call people in general? I really want to know the expression on Professor McGonagall's face after being called by you." Seal faced Dumbledore without any fear, and immediately smiled without a smile. Fire. Dumbledore wasn't angry, he also knew that Seal was a pippy shrimp anyway, and he would skin him sooner or later anyway. He occasionally skinned a Pixier, and Seal wouldn't mind in his heart. This was considered their teacher. Have a special way of getting along. Hearing Seal's words, Newt couldn't help but chuckled, then quickly coughed and pretended to be calm, and handed Seal a dozen of letter paper. "Don't make trouble with Shire, this time it's really serious." Seal took the letter with some doubts, but didn't take it to heart. He said that there is still something in this realm that the three of them can't handle together. He glanced at his teacher viciously, and regardless of Dumbledore's expression, he whispered. "After saying that sooner or later, I pulled out your oxygen tube, and then I read the letter." The letter wasn't very long. The front was Mrs. Tina's letter to Newt after explaining the situation, and the back was the news of her family's safety. But after reading this letter, Seal's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. "I think we should take a look," Charles said with a dark face after reading the letter. Chapter 150-Chaos Realm. Seal's face was terrifyingly dark. The reason was very simple. There was a problem on the side of his parents and Hermione. The matter has to start a few days ago. When the parents of the two families separated from Charles and Hermione, Mrs. William immediately contacted some friends of the French anti-terrorist SWAT team. The two families lived in the SWAT team's compound that night. After that, the two sides began to unify intelligence. Mrs. William was a police veteran, but what was surprising was that both Mr. William and Mr. Granger were both Marines. The only one who had no fighting power was Mrs. Granger. Of course, Mrs. Granger did not disappoint either. Granger, who usually does not look like a mountain, burst out with great energy in this incident. She almost completed the work of planning, analysis, and strategic deployment. This surprised Mr. William, and couldn't help taunting Hermione's IQ in front of Mr. Granger several times because he inherited his mother's IQ, which made Mr. Granger very angry. The plan at the beginning went very smoothly. The goal of the SWAT team and the two families was almost the same. They were to take down this damned evil force, plus the help of Mrs. Williams' friends, and Mrs. Granger's plan. This group of people almost used a state of almost crushing to quickly grasp a lot of criminal evidence of the Reynolds family, and began a large-scale arrest. But just when they finally got rid of Renault's boss, and they were thinking of killing the entire Renault family's cadres in one go, an embarrassing thing happened. The leader of French characteristics was found killed at home, and for a time, the huge parade almost turned into the event that made the French people lose their royal family. The SWAT team was assigned a large number of personnel, and the enemy was cunningly hiding in the chaos, which gave everyone a headache. Fortunately, Mrs. Tina and Hermione appeared in front of everyone at this time. With some very secret help from Mrs. Tina, everyone found a clue again. Just as everyone packed up their equipment and broke into a farm that seemed to have been abandoned for a long time, something unexpected happened. At the beginning, it was still a very common firearms melee, and a group of rabble was no match for the professionals led by Mrs. William, but the subsequent situation really surprised Mrs. William. There are not only muggles here, but even wizards. When this group of wizards who didn't know where they came from appeared, the scene was very chaotic for a while. The curse was accompanied by bullets flying everywhere, and pieces of flames rose into the air, mixed with fragments of muggle grenades, and even some strange things. Strange creatures attacked the captured team members from time to time. If it wasn't for Mrs. Williams' decision to retreat immediately, and because she was worried that Mrs. Tina also accompanied the team to the police, it is really hard to say what would have happened in this different battle for a while. Of course, the final result was that everyone here was given a secrecy order, and even many of the team members who participated in the operation were quietly taken away without knowing the end. So Tina, who felt that something was unusual, immediately wrote and contacted Newt for help, which was obviously beyond the scope of their expectations. Charles, almost clenching his back teeth, said these words to Dumbledore. Dumbledore was not surprised. CL's characteristic of caring about the people around him was what Dumbledore valued. Looking at the terrifying Seal with a gloomy face, Dumbledore comforted softly, "Don't worry about Seal, your family is fine, they are safe, so don't worry, and this time I am precisely because of this matter." Came. After speaking, Dumbledore looked at everyone present, and did not shy away from Zhang Jiwei, who was curious but pretended not to care, and continued. According to my information, so far, the Muggle secrecy law of the International Wizarding Federation is facing a huge challenge in the French territory. Some mad wizard families have joined forces with some delusional Muggles who seek longevity and power. They secretly arrest some magical animals and innocent Muggle passers-by all the year round, and carry out inhumane experiments, and because there are some rich and powerful figures who participate in these plans, the investigation of the International Wizarding Union is very slow. They are so good at hiding among Muggles that many of the wizards on duty who have investigated the matter over the years have been unsuccessful, although ostensibly they are only exploiting Muggle greed to swindle money and position in Muggle society. At that time, according to our intelligence, it was obvious that they had a more terrifying purpose, that is, to fulfill their dream and establish Nurmengard again. Dumbledore paused when he said this, and gave Newt and Seal some buffer time. At this time, Seal was already stunned. His mistress may not know that they have reached the second generation of the Dark Lord. There were some people who were dreaming the sweet dreams he compiled at the time. These are related to Grindelwald. Seal couldn't help but ask. After all, he spent a summer vacation with the old man, and not to mention anything else, the old man is not an ordinary old man who is a bit arrogant. Sharks didn't want to let this shitpot get stuck on the old man's head again. Hearing CL's question, Newt pricked up his ears for a while. To say who was the one who fought the most, it wasn't Dumbledore who was laughing across from him, but himself. If this big devil really wanted to, if he came out to seek revenge, Newt felt that his current state would definitely not be able to beat Grindelwald. Hearing CL's words, Dumbledore's smile was obviously more intense. Seeing CL's appearance, Dumbledore also knew that Seal had established a relationship with his friend who was not a teacher and a student but more than a teacher and a student. Deeper feelings. No, Seal, although they support Grindelwald's existence in name, but those are just names. Based on my information, most of these wizards are pure-blooded dark wizards, wanted by various countries. Hiding with Muggle means, and enjoying a high quality of life that was not there before, this organization can develop so quickly. And according to my recent investigation, these things don't look like the brains of those stupid pure-blooded dark wizards, who have a group of people behind them who are planning and providing intelligence funds. Hearing Dumbledore's words, except for Zhang Jiwei who didn't react or even knew what they were talking about, Seal and Newt took a deep breath together almost immediately. How dare they? Newt seemed to become surprisingly angry after being surprised, like a lion who admired and roared from the top of the mountain again. Dumbledore was very calm, as if these things were what he expected. Calm down, Newt. Goblins are never a race to be messed with. Oh, yes, those goblins call themselves Chaos Realm. Just when Seal wanted to ask more questions, Zhang Jiwei interrupted the discussion of several people first. Well, I'm sorry, I think these are all your secrets. Am I a bit bad here? Zhang Jiwei said to the three of them in a slightly awkward tone. He had listened to it for a long time just now. In addition to many words that he did not understand, looking at the expressions of the three, Zhang Jiwei also knew that they were talking about something very important. Dumbledore didn't answer Zhang Jiwei's question, but looked at Zhang Jiwei very seriously and said, I'm sorry, my friend from afar, let you know some bad things the first time you came here, but it's a pity that it really has something to do with you. Zhang Jiwei, who heard Dumbledore's words, was stunned. It was the first time he set foot on this land. What kind of chaos country or chaos country could have anything to do with him? Just when Zhang Jiwei wanted to refute, Dumbledore said directly to Zhang Jiwei, Zhu was captured by them. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Zhang Jiwei's face suddenly became gloomy. Well, it really has something to do with him. Chapter 141-Chaos State 2. Okay, Dumbledore, let's talk about this chaotic country in detail. Why we have never heard of these things. Newt rubbed his temples fiercely and said to Dumbledore. One thing after another recently, Newt now feels that he is a little powerless, and some strange organizations have popped up in Paris, which was already chaotic, and Newt is now beginning to feel that his retirement life farther and farther away. Hearing Newt's words, Dumbledore smiled and shook his head, then said, No, Newt, strictly speaking, both you and I have had an encounter with this chaotic country. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Newt's eyes widened in horror. Impossible. Dumbledore, I'm not too old to be confused. I never remember any shit I've come into contact with. Dumbledore looked at Newt's appearance, and just waved his hand to signal Newt to take it easy, so he continued, the first appearance of the Kingdom of Chaos was in 1621, when the goblins asked for the establishment of a parliament, which was rejected by various countries. The Ministry of Magic refused, and the angry goblins organized the first rebellion in England. The Goblins' Rebellion. It was mentioned in the history class. Seal also said in surprise. Seal clearly remembered the content of the class at that time, and Hermione was still regretting that this question did not appear in the final exam. Dumbledore nodded and continued, Yes, there is this history in the history textbooks, but the truth of the facts was hidden. Dumbledore paused and then said, At that time, many high-level rebels escaped the pursuit of the British Ministry of Magic through their wealth, and even in the subsequent negotiations, facing the pressure of the wizards, they were conducting some negotiations. Later decided to give up the right to use the wand, as a bargaining chip to appease the wizards. In contrast, they hoped to gain jurisdiction over money. The reason at the time was very good. The goblins wanted to think for their descendants. They would rather die than their descendants become house elves. But the wizards at the time did not realize what a wrong decision they had made. On the contrary, the Ministry of Magic, which was controlled by pureblood at that time, wished that a group of guys who knew how to manage money would manage their wealth for themselves. So Gringotts Bank was successfully taken over by the goblins, and the money-loving goblins also managed the wealth of the wizards dutifully, but they remembered the insults they suffered at the beginning. As time went on, the goblins soon discovered one thing. Compared with individual magic, the money and capital they controlled seemed to be able to control wizards more perfectly. The goblins were very happy for a while. A feeling of leaping over the wizards arises spontaneously, but don't forget, there are still some people inside them who have not forgotten that they have lost the right to cast spells. Soon, conflicts broke out within the goblins. Some goblins believed that at this time, they could control most wizards through capital, and there was no need to provoke wizards and let them wage war against goblins again. Another part of the goblins believes that capital without power is a mirror after all. Since the wizards can give the goblins the right to manage their capital by force, of course, they can also deprive the goblins of their management right by force. The two sides began to quarrel constantly for the difference of ideas. However, with the development of time, the development of society began to become faster and faster. The fairies opened Gringotts all over the world through the dividends of the times, and even gradually became a behemoth. Unable to suppress their greedy nature any longer, the fairies began an internal struggle. The struggle of the fairies is actually very simple. To put it bluntly, it is a game of capital. The fairies of the two factions began to start a series of games of capital through Gin-Galleon in their respective hands. Dumbledore took a sip of the water on the table, looked at Charles and Newt, who were shocked, and continued. In the end, you should know that greed triumphs over peace, and the goblins who were unwilling to provoke wizards were expelled from Europe, traveled to America, and established themselves on another continent. And the goblins left behind were all greedy masters without exception. That is, the prototype of the chaotic kingdom appeared at that time. At first, they did not deliberately hide, but only appeared as the elders of the fairies, but the Ministry of Magic of various countries is not a vegetarian, and soon found that a prototype of a parliament began to appear inside the fairies. Thinking back to the original rebellion, the wizards immediately went to Gringotts with the contract they signed and demanded to hand over a few elders. Of course, the fairies are not vegetarians. After a huge amount of money transactions and the appearance of a few scapegoats, the turmoil quickly subsided. The fairies' councils were completely hidden and turned underground. Even many fairies didn't know the existence of this organization. The fairies who were not satisfied with just manipulating capital kept forbearance until that person appeared. Grindelwald. Hearing this, Newt couldn't hold back and asked. Dumbledore nodded and continued, Grindelwald's ideals are not compatible with the society at that time, so it is foreseeable that war will inevitably occur. Once a war occurs, then in the chaos, it will be the hidden goblins. Best chance. At that time, I and Grindelwald, who had experienced a lot of things, faintly felt that everything was being stirred by an invisible big hand, and many things were being pushed forward. Grindelwald, who realized that something was wrong, contacted me immediately, and then you all know that we, who were never willing to be manipulated, decided to use a duel to decide the direction of the wizarding world, and I think you all know it. After Dumbledore finished speaking, his face was gloomy, as if he was recalling something, but then he immediately adjusted and said, the last time I felt the appearance of this big hand was more than 50 years ago. Before Dumbledore could finish speaking, he was interrupted by the exclamation of Charles, Tom Riddle. Dumbledore nodded, not blaming Charles for the interruption, and continued, yes, it's Voldemort. Voldemort's appearance was too unexpected. When Voldemort was still Tom, he disappeared for a few years. When he returned, he had already changed into the appearance of Voldemort. Of course, I wouldn't doubt it if it was just that, but now that I think about it, Voldemort succeeded too quickly at that time, so fast that if it wasn't for his own willful decision to deal with Harry himself, the person who failed in the end might be it's me. Combined with Tina's discovery this time, I figured out what happened. If I'm not mistaken, they are using their reputation and financial status to attract some fugitives in the name of creating Numongad, trying to create a Voldemort again through the method of 50 years ago. Chapter 152_ have a surprise blind box. Thank you for your patronage. After listening to Dumbledore's words, Seal couldn't help rubbing the goosebumps on his body. Seal didn't expect that the water in Harry Potter, which looked like a fairy tale, would be so deep. Then again, for some unknown reason, Char always felt that the sub-empire's heart would not die. In fact, I don't blame Charles for feeling this way. After all, these goblins think very well. If Voldemort really succeeded in taking the first place in the wizarding world, then the entire British Ministry of Magic would definitely be reduced to Voldemort's words. As the actual control of money, they will only be reused by Voldemort, and under Voldemort's high pressure, the savings of many generations of pure-blood families will eventually fall into the pockets of goblins. It is easier for the wealthy goblins to deal with Voldemort than to deal with the entire wizarding world, not to mention that as the people behind the scenes, in the time of Voldemort's high-pressure policy, it is absolutely not difficult to complete the integration of the British wizarding world. And as a long-lived species, even if it is boiled in the end, Voldemort can be boiled to death. At that time, the whole of Britain will be reduced to the land of goblins. The goblins' wishful thinking was extremely loud, and Charles felt that Voldemort was not a fool, and it was impossible not to see this. The production of Voldemort's Horcrux can be said to not only guarantee his immortality, but also ensure that he will not be betrayed by the goblins. Seal deduced in his heart, and couldn't help applauding Lao Fu's move, but when Seal thought that Lao Fu's fate was to be defeated by a baby in the end, Seal couldn't help but shuddered. If all this is a script drawn up by the goblins who discovered Lao Fu's plan, then all this is really terrible. Seal rubbed his face vigorously, to drive this terrible thought out of his head. It can't be so dark, Seal began to keep telling himself. But it was obvious that both Dumbledore and Newt understood what Seal was thinking at this time, and both of them were thinking silently. On the other hand, Zhang Jiwei looked indifferent, although he also saw that this matter was not simple. After all, as an outsider, even if he saw that Sha'ur's identity was from the Celestial Dynasty, Zhang Jiwei at this time was not good at interfering in other people's housework. As the saying goes, non-interference in other people's internal affairs is my rabbit's basic literacy. In the end, it was Dumbledore who spoke first. Okay, don't think too much, we're going to launch an attack on this stronghold in a few days, and we need a little manpower during this period. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel's frown deepened. Teacher, shouldn't we contact the Ministry of Magic? Hearing Ciel's answer, Dumbledore smiled and shook his head. No, Ciel, you can't contact the Ministry of Magic. Since these people have established a stronghold here in France, it means that there must be some people in the Ministry of Magic who know about it. So not only can't the Ministry of Magic be notified, we're even delaying them. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel's temples began to jump up unconsciously. The reason was too simple. To hold back the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore could only take action and use his various identities to delay the Ministry of Magic. Thinking of this, Sha'urju's life that had been a little bright began to become dark again, and the thigh he wanted to hug was gone. Dumbledore clearly saw Ciel's thoughts, frowned slightly, and then said to Ciel, as if thinking of something, "Don't worry, someone will take care of you, and in terms of numbers, the people of Asur it is impossible to beat the people at the opposite base, even if those people are crooked." Quote. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel burst out laughing and crying, and then complained mercilessly, "Teacher, what about the promised surprise? There are only surprises here." Hearing Ciel's words, Dumbledore had a rare embarrassed expression on his face. For a while, it seemed that he didn't know how to answer Ciel, so he could only perfunctory with a smile, "You can't blame me, only saying things are impermanent, I didn't expect such a thing to happen." Quote. Then, as if thinking of something, he continued, "However, if you insist, there are still surprises, but whether you can meet them depends on your luck." Ciel just threw it away with a big white eye. After a long time, "Why don't you leave me here to open the blind box? The key is that there is also a blind box for the thank you patronage option." Ciel said that you still have a lot of routines for adults, and your own small arms and legs are really far behind. Dumbledore was obviously a little embarrassed by Ciel. As a respected old man, his planned itinerary was embarrassed to death because of Mo's willful behavior. Of course, if it wasn't for this person's willfulness, they wouldn't be able to find out who their real enemy was, so they can only say that good and bad are interdependent. On the other hand, Zhang Jiwei laughed with a look of indifference on his face. It seemed that Ciel's teasing of his teacher resonated with him. Zhang Jiwei couldn't hold back, and patted Ciel on the shoulder while laughing. "Young man, if you have time, be sure to come to Longhu Mountain. I think you and my apprentice will definitely have a common language." Sha-Er rolled his eyes at the unscrupulous Taoist priest and didn't say much, but Dumbledore stood up a little embarrassedly, patted the dust that didn't exist on his body, and said to the crowd, "Well, I think I have to go first. After all, there are still many things waiting for me. As for the date of the attack, just wait for my notice. I don't think it will be too long." After he finished speaking, he started to walk out the door on his own, until he reached the door before continuing as if he remembered something. "Oh, by the way, I've written to Tina to bring Hermione and your two parents back. It should be there in the evening. Charles, remember to comfort your family. According to Tina, they seem to be. It took quite a blow." Quote. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Charles sighed softly and said, "Don't worry, teacher, I know what to do, don't worry." After hearing Ciel's answer, Dumbledore nodded, opened the door and left. After seeing Dumbledore leave, Ciel patted his cheek, forcibly cheered up, and said while looking at the two big men in front of him, "Well, nothing can heal the soul more than a good meal, so the two of you, for the harmony of the family, the time has come for you to be needed." As soon as Sha-Er's voice fell, Zhang Jiwei and Newt were stunned for a moment, then they looked at each other and laughed helplessly. There is nothing wrong with what Ciel said. Nothing can soothe a wounded heart better than the last meal. Chapter 153-Night Talk. In the end, with the help of Zhang Jiwei, Ciel made a large table of beautiful Chinese food. Newt was drooling when he saw it, but he had no choice but to wait for a few people to go home. The sun had just set, and with a screeching brake sound, the door of the hut was suddenly pushed open, and Mrs. Tina returned with the two adults and Hermione. The mood of a few Muggle adults is obviously not very good, especially Mrs. William. It was originally a very simple operation to remove danger, but because of the addition of wizard power, the contrast formed in an instant made Mrs. William begin to help Shire. And Hermione worried. After encountering the power of the wizard, the four adults couldn't help but hadn't slept well for several days, and everyone felt that they were as powerless as a baby when facing the wizard. But facing the fruits of Sha-Er and Zhang Jiwei's labor, the four parents still squeezed out smiles for face and sat at the dining table. Zhang Jiwei clearly saw that the four parents were not in a good mood. After a period of mutual introduction, Zhang Jiwei began to take the role of active atmosphere, relying on the magical Oriental story and some of his own powers different from magic. A smile finally leaked from the faces of the four parents. It was very late after everyone was full. Mrs. Tina was cleaning the dishes. The four parents had already gone to rest. At present, only the wizards and Zhang Jiwei were sitting in the living room silently. I don't know how long it took. When Sha-Er slapped his forehead, he remembered that there was still a person lying in the treatment room. He jumped up and rushed to the kitchen. Although it was some leftovers, Sha-Er believed that Meow would be well prepared if the dishes were properly arranged. Big Brother Fu didn't know what happened. Of course, Meow Fu didn't mind. After all, if it weren't for the scent of the room in the afternoon, Meow Fu swore that he really believed in Ciel's nonsense. When Sha-Er came back from Meow Fu, Newt and Tina had already gone to rest. Zhang Jiwei looked at the stubborn little girl who was still sitting on the sofa, and gave Sha-Er a look that I understood. Then, the dirty dishes in Ciel's hand were sent into the kitchen, and the two of them went upstairs to rest. Ciel looked at the little girl sitting on the sofa, sighed softly, and walked up to sit next to Hermione. "Charles, to be honest, I almost thought I was going to be an orphan this time. If it wasn't for Mrs. Tina's uneasy invitation to follow me, After a long time, Hermione spoke with difficulty to Ciel said. Hearing Hermione's words, Ciel didn't say anything, and hugged Hermione gently. For a time, Hermione's grievances and the worries and fears that had been worrying for many days flooded into my heart like a tide. For a while, Hermione began to cry continuously on CL's shoulder. In fact, Shire knew that Hermione was a strong girl. Hermione would not back down in the face of any difficulties, but when it came to her relatives, Hermione would become vulnerable. After this incident, CL suddenly understood why Hermione would put an oblivion spell on her parents before the war in the original book, and only after the war did she find her parents. Sighing lightly, CL gently stroked Hermione's hair and comforted, "Okay, isn't it all right? No one thought of the appearance of those bad wizards, it's not to blame anyone. People." Hermione didn't answer CL, but simply held CL and continued to vent the fear in her heart. Seeing Hermione's appearance, CL didn't say much. He carefully took out his wand, and after waving it, the lights in the living room gradually went out, and the bright moonlight shone on the two of them through the window. I don't know how long it took. Hermione slowly stopped crying, and slowly broke free from CL's embrace. CL smiled softly, and said to Hermione, "It seems that I know it all." The lady finally calmed down a bit. Hermione punched CL angrily, and her random expression became worried. She said to CL, "Don't make trouble with CL. To be honest, I really don't want to experience this kind of thing again." CL also looked at Hermione seriously and replied, "Don't worry, there is no next time, leave it to me." Seemingly embarrassed by CL's high promise, Hermione's face turned slightly red, and then, as if she was covering up something, she began to keep asking what was going on. Mrs. Tina did not explain the specific situation to him and the four parents, but from the few words after the few people returned, Hermione had already discovered that things were different. Seeing Hermione's expression that if you don't explain it, don't even think about leaving, CL sighed helplessly, and told Hermione some of the content of the exchange with Dumbledore in the afternoon. Of course, some of the most important things are still omitted. After all, the inference that the birth of the two generations of Dark Lords is related to this chaotic country is too amazing. It was easy to deduce these things according to Hermione's IQ, so CL just picked some unimportant things to tell Hermione. But even the fact that it was the castrated version surprised Hermione. Just like Shire, she never closed her mouth. After all, it seemed that the content of the textbook was far from reality. Hermione also read all the series of historical materials that CL bought at the beginning, but I didn't expect that many things were still hidden, such as the Goblins' secret organization Chaos Kingdom, which was only known today. After CL finished speaking, Hermione, who had satisfied her curiosity, felt sleepy. Under CL's urging, she reluctantly went upstairs to sleep. CL stood in the living room and watched Hermione disappear on the stairs, and then he said helplessly, "Mom, aren't you tired after listening for so long?" Hearing CL's words, Mrs. Williams stood a little embarrassed by the living room window and looked at CL with worry in her eyes. Seeing his mother's appearance, Charles knew what his mother was worried about, so he showed his signature sunny smile and said to the worried Mrs. Williams, "Don't worry Mom, the sky is falling and the teacher is still wearing it. Don't worry." Quote. Mrs. Williams didn't say anything more when she heard Charles's words, but her eyes were a little dark, and she said to Charles, "Charles, I don't know what you are doing in the wizarding world, but promise Mother, you must pay attention to safety, okay? Mom, maybe I won't be able to protect you in the future." Hearing Mrs. Williams' words, Charles was also a little moved, stepped forward and hugged this great mother who was worried about her safety. "Don't worry Mom, I will pay attention to safety, and I will be your pride. You have always been my child." Chapter 154-Mrs. Williams PTSD. In fact, CL is not a Westerner in the traditional sense. At least CL can't do anything and always talk about "I love you." Not only Mrs. Williams, but people who have been in contact with CL for a long time have discovered this. Shire is more accustomed to crushing his love like the traditional Chinese in his previous life, twisting it finely, and rubbing it into his daily actions. So Mrs. Williams gradually felt relieved after hearing CL's promise, because Mrs. William also knew that young eagles always have to fly alone, not to mention that the world in which she and Seal are only intersected, but not the same. Blend. After the two hugged for a while, Mrs. William was a little nostalgic for the little eagle that was about to grow, but considering the time, Mrs. William still said to Charles, "Okay, Charles, I think you should go to rest. Now, it's very late." Shire also knew very well what his mother looked like. After the rare tenderness, he would definitely return to the original iron blood, so he did not delay, jumped out of his mother's arms, and honestly prepared to go upstairs to rest. Mrs. Williams still maintained the habit she had formed before. As long as she didn't see Seal entering the room, she would never leave. Don't ask why. You would expect a person who likes to bomb his own backyard to grow old without supervision. Go to sleep honestly. Although Seal also felt that this was outrageous, it just happened. This is the root of the disease left by Mrs. William, and it is estimated that it will be difficult to cure in this life. Charles, who was walking to the stairs honestly, suddenly seemed to remember something, and suddenly turned around and ran back. This shocked Mrs. William, who was about to leave. She knew too much about the unfortunate child of Charles. Every time at home, as long as Seal is in high spirits, there is definitely something to suffer. Before Charles could speak, Mrs. William reflexively said, "Don't think about gunpowder, sugar, any weapons or raw materials." Shire, who had just run to his mother's side, heard such a sentence before he could speak. He froze in place for a while, not knowing how to react, but deep in his heart he began to complain frantically that this was for his mother. "Did you come up with PTSD or what happened?" Mrs. William looked at Charles, who had a black question mark on his face, and then realized that this was not at home. Thinking of her subconscious reaction just now, she felt a little embarrassed for a while. "Mom, this is the impression I have in your mind." Seal couldn't hold back. He had only bombed the garden once, and he committed the crime together with his father. Why did he take the blame for himself? Of course, the 3-shot Shire that Lao Fu ate would never admit it. Hogwarts, school rules taught Shire. As long as you didn't catch me on the spot, I would never admit it. Stop talking, what are you doing? Hurry up and go to bed. Mrs. William felt embarrassed for a while, so she could only use her mother's majesty to suppress Charles. Seeing his mother's appearance, Seal also knew that he couldn't complain, otherwise he would definitely lose his temper. The angry Mrs. William would be really scary. So Charles did not ink, took out the small notebook he carried with him, and began to thank him and drew on it. After a while, Charles tore the note and handed it to Mrs. William. Mrs. William looked at the words and legends on the note by the moonlight, and was a little confused for a while. "What do you want this for?" Mrs. William asked with some doubts. Seal answered hesitantly, "It's nothing, I'm just curious and want to do some experiments. First of all, these things are not weapons, and secondly, they are not the raw materials for making weapons, they completely meet your requirements." Mrs. William looked at Seal with some doubts, but agreed to Seal's request. Seal happily went back to sleep. Before leaving, she did not forget to instruct her mother that she must get a double copy. After speaking, she left without looking back, leaving behind Mrs. William, who was scratching her head while looking at the note in her hand, and finally shrugged and decided to help her son find it tomorrow. After all, she could really help him. Not much, and what's on the note isn't anything dangerous. Early the next morning, Mrs. William left Newt's cottage to help Charles find what he needed, and our Charles, who slept too late last night, was still in bed at this time. It wasn't until about noon that Mrs. William rushed back in a hurry. When she came back, she handed 2 air boxes to Charles. Charles cheered and didn't care about eating. He picked it up one by one and ran upstairs. "Go." Mrs. William was a little worried when she saw Shire's happy look. After looking at Mrs. Granger and exchanging countless information with one eye, the two mothers looked at Hermione in unison. Hermione knew for a long time that she couldn't run away. Ever since Hermione moved to the same community as Seal, the responsibility of watching Seal not let him do something dangerous has fallen on her, and Seal is also very respectful. listened to Hermione very much. Although occasionally Hermione would be led astray by Seal and do silly things together. Receiving the eyes of the two mothers, Hermione sighed helplessly, picked up the half-eaten food in front of her, and Seal only ate half of the steak because of excitement, and went upstairs to find Seal. Although the two mothers thought very well, this time it was obvious that they had miscalculated. Ever since Hermione went up to find Seal, the two of them began to mysteriously do not know what to study in the room, except for using the toilet and going downstairs. During the meal time, the two of them rarely appeared in front of everyone. Time passed day by day, and soon, a week passed, and a lot of things really happened in this week. Meow Fu recovered and was discharged from the hospital on the third day that Shire started his research. Now he and Zhang Jiwei are practicing hands and feet in Newt's small courtyard. Regarding their agile skills, Mrs. William, who is a police officer, was deeply impressed, and she always liked to pull Mr. William to the side to steal teachers. Zhang Jiwei and Meow Fu didn't care either. They both knew that even if Mrs. William was a genius, she could only learn a little bit of boxing and kung fu. Coupled with the relationship with Seal, they always liked to teach Mrs. William when they had nothing to do. This is a pain for Mr. William. The reason is very simple. Although Mr. William, who is a doctor, keeps fitness all the year round, he can't beat Mrs. William who has been training all the year round, not to mention that there are two masters next to him, so Mr. William's the biggest use is as a sandbag. Of course, the three of them still knew what they had in mind. The most they wanted was to let Mr. William hurt a little bit. It was absolutely impossible for them to get hurt. Chapter 155 _ The new invention of Shire and Hermione. Of course, the most important thing that happened this week was the constant presence of people in Mr. Newt's cabin, many of them members of the Order of the Phoenix, and a few wearing golden masks. If it weren't for Dumbledore's handwritten letter and Phoenix Fox in his hand, the whole room would be ready to pull out his wand and fuck him. Fortunately, the people with the golden masks showed the letter in time. Newt also recognized Fox, and came out in time to stop the arrogant crowd, which made everyone sit down calmly. It's just that after such a commotion, the people in the golden masks are always gathered together by a few people, and there is no plan to merge with the crowd. Even at night, a few masked people would rather set up a tent in the yard than talk to them. At first, everyone felt embarrassed. After all, they all had to deal with comrades of the same enemy, which always made people feel uncomfortable. Okay. But after a long time, everyone will not care. Finally, at the weekend, Dumbledore appeared in the hut. With Dumbledore's appearance, everyone knew that the war was about to begin. Dumbledore stood in front of the crowd and clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention. Okay, I think it should be everyone who participated in the war. First of all, I want to thank you for your efforts. You are all heroes. After speaking, Dumbledore slowly glanced at everyone present, as if he wanted to keep their appearance in his heart. Then he continued, the plan this time is very simple. I borrowed the name of the International Wizarding Federation to hold the Ministry of Magic, and the Order of the Phoenix was in charge of the attack. Try to catch as many of them as possible, don't fight, and leave the rest to these friends just fine. After speaking, Dumbledore pointed to the people with golden masks gathered together, and then continued. I hope you all pay attention to safety. We will face a group of crazy dark wizards and some dangerous magical animals in this operation, so I hope you must pay attention to your own safety. I don't want to see anyone fall. You will all be hope for the future. Quote. After speaking, Dumbledore bowed slightly to everyone. Everyone is also full of emotions, and everyone is ready to fight. Only Newt expressed concern. Seeing that everyone was discussing, Newt leaned over to Dumbledore's side and whispered, Dumbledore, who are these people with golden masks? Are they really trustworthy? Hearing Newt's question, Dumbledore's mouth twitched, and he whispered to Newt, don't worry, they are trustworthy, you can call them Red Torrents. As for the specifics, you don't ask, trust me, you don't want to know. When Newt heard Dumbledore's words, he looked suspiciously at the old man beside him, but he kept muttering in his heart that you weren't like this back then. It was also difficult for Mr. Newt. At a young age, he actually understood the expression of the black question mark on his own under the training of Shire's master and apprentice. Just as everyone was finishing packing up and getting ready to go, Seal dragged Hermione all the way downstairs and rushed downstairs. "Wait, wait, me and Hermione are going too," Seal started shouting as he rushed down the stairs. No 5 inches as soon as Seal's voice fell, the parents of the two families and Dumbledore refuted them in unison. "Charles, this is not a joke, you're only in the 2nd grade, you can't go to such a scene." Mrs. William and Mrs. Granger immediately began to educate Charles. "Char, your parents are right, I think you should be here with your parents. I think it's hard for a Meowfu to protect all of you, do you think so?" Zhang Jiwei also stood up to face Char said, not forgetting to emphasize that Meowfu will also stay here. Even Newt stood up to refute Seal. "It's too dangerous, Seal, have you forgotten the dark wizard we saw in Miranda's memory?" On the other hand, Dumbledore did not speak after refuting, but looked at Seal thoughtfully. Seeing that everyone was refuting, Char was not surprised at all. At first, he thought that such a situation would definitely occur. To be honest, if Seal really wanted to go to the front with the big army now, Seal himself was beating a drum in his heart. After all, as a new young man who grew up under the red flag, he had never experienced any war scene in his 2 lifetimes, not even a melee, not to mention that Seal was currently carrying the seal of Slytherin. He locked most of Seal's abilities at once. Although the amount of knowledge has increased, and the amount of magic spells has also increased, you can't find the magic spell on the battlefield that is suitable for that kind of battle situation, right? If it really did, it would make no difference if it went to the battlefield, and it would make no difference if the gun was fired first in the trenches. Therefore, in response to this situation, Seal had already prepared for it. Seeing that everyone was pushing back, Seal was really not panicked at all, the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Seal had already expected this situation, this wave of Seal was in the atmosphere. "Stop, listen to me first." Seal smugly called off everyone's objections, and then opened his little box with Hermione, and the two of them took out something similar to Gandalf's staff. The difference is that this thing replaces the place where the staff used to be inlaid with various crystals to the butt, and also adds a high-powered sight only for sniper rifles, and then the hole becomes shorter, it looks more like just a sniper rifle. Seeing this thing that Seal brought out, everyone was a little confused for a while, and they didn't understand what this kid was doing. Seal, on the other hand, completely ignored the crowd and introduced them to everyone triumphantly. "What everyone sees now is what Hermione and I have developed after a week of research and development. Seal and Hermione's one-style support staff. This is an invention that spans the ages. Let me show you how to use it." After finishing speaking, Seal took out the wand on his waist, fixed it on the card slot of the muzzle, then took out a sniper elite appearance, lay down on the ground, and began to chant the spell. With the sound of Seal, remove your weapon, fainted, smashed to pieces, and read out, the thing in Seal's hand was like a real sniper rifle, and it continuously fired a shot at the muzzle. The magic spell hit the opposite wall. After the demonstration, Seal stood up, looked at everyone very proudly, and continued, "This is the extension of the wand. The magic pattern engraved by our great genius Miss Granger on the top is linked to the extension. The position of the magic wand, so that the wand can cast spells. I named these 2 snipers. Bah, the support staff called the princess and the knight." Seal said triumphantly, ignoring Hermione's blushing face behind him, almost like a monkey's butt. It was also at this time that Hermione began to wonder if Seal had some intermittent social bullshit. Chapter 156_Sniper Char applies to fight. Seeing Seal's complacent appearance, everyone looked like they didn't know how to react. Even the well-informed Dumbledore didn't know what Seal was doing. "So what?" Newt looked at Seal with some confusion. After hearing what Seal said, Newt still didn't understand what Seal meant. On the contrary, Mr. William and Mr. Granger, who had been soldiers, looked at each other and reacted immediately, shouting in unison, "Sniper!" Originally, Charles had a black line when he heard Newt's inquiry. These wizards are really rotten wood and can't be carved. I don't know what such a cross-generation invention is, but after hearing the two fathers sigh after exhaling, Seal was so excited that tears almost came down his forehead. In the end, there are still people who know what to do. To be honest, Ciel's idea of adding a scope to his wand is still in a previous life when he saw a picture of Harry's actor holding two guns, and a netizen added a sentence below. Ron, this thing is much easier to use than a wand, that's the inspiration. In addition, considering that the magic spell has no falling line, and is not affected by wind and air, if you add a sight glass, those books will be the same as opening and hanging the center door. Not to mention that there are a group of small pistols on the opposite side. Unless the opposite side takes out a sniper grenade, or learns from Grindelwald and sends a big blue dragon with a gas stove, Seal is absolutely not afraid. After hearing the exclamations of the two fathers, all the people present looked at the two of them without knowing why. The two of them were not ambiguous. You started to explain the tactical cooperation you learned in the army, and the sniper rifle in the end. What's going on? After a long time, everyone understood what Seal had done. Well, to put it bluntly, it is the existence of long-distance, sneak attacks, right? Newt asked uncertainly. When Charles heard Newt's words, he couldn't help but rolled his eyes. Please speak well, this is a support expander. What is a sneak attack? At this point, everyone can understand the idea of Seal. It is very simple. Since everyone is against Seal going to the battlefield, then Seal will find another way, find a way that no one has thought of before, and let it go. Thinking of this, the eyes of everyone looking at Seal became extremely dangerous. After all, the appearance of this thing means that everyone present may be attacked. The most annoying thing is that I still can't find who attacked. That's the scariest thing. Seal also clearly saw that the expressions of everyone were not quite right, so he immediately raised his hands and gave a French military salute. Don't worry, the blueprints have been destroyed, I won't tell Hermione about it, it will never appear in this world. The third. Seeing the appearance of Seal, everyone felt relieved, and Dumbledore even frowned and began to consider the pros and cons. After all, strictly speaking, this invention of Seal can indeed protect many people. Mrs. William is still a little worried. If Charles goes with this thing, although it is not a frontal battlefield, it is still dangerous. Mrs. William could speak. Dumbledore finally made the decision. Charles, Hermione, you two can go, but you must not approach the battlefield until you are completely sure that there is no danger. After speaking, they looked at Seal and Hermione seriously, and of course the two little ones immediately nodded to indicate that they would absolutely follow the instructions. Newt and John Joy looked at Seal and Hermione worriedly, and said to Dumbledore, Dumbledore, they are still too young. Wouldn't it be too early for them to come into contact with them now? Yes, Pindow also feels that it is too early for children to be exposed to war. Dumbledore shook his head resolutely. It's not too early. You must know that in the magic world, not everyone is a good person. They will encounter these things sooner or later, rather than let them know what to do when they encounter them. Well, let's get them involved now, and we're a group of people who set an example for the kids and tell them what to do. After he finished speaking, Dumbledore turned to look at the two mothers. Although he said so, whether he agreed or not depends on the decision of the two mothers. Mrs. William and Mrs. Granger looked at each other, and both saw the worry in their eyes. To be honest, the two mothers did not let their children go through this danger, but they also knew that they could not protect them. Lifetime. What's more, the two are still wizards. Even now, the two mothers seem a little powerless to protect their children. After all, in terms of individual strength, wizards are almost crushing muggles. In the end, Mrs. William nodded, thinking of her conversation with Seal. Mrs. William also knew that she could not restrict the flight of the young eagle, even if the flight path was full of dangers. Okay, I agree with them to go, but the two of you must promise me that you will never participate indiscriminately. You are still too young, and ensuring safety is the most important thing. Mrs. William almost made this decision with gritted teeth. Who has fought with wizards? she knows too much that the power of wizards is terrifying. Hearing that his mother agreed to let him participate in the action, Seal almost cheered, and even Hermione had a faint smile on her face. For the two little ones, it was support on the surface and revenge in the dark. Seal had already discussed it with Hermione. After all, not everyone could bully his Muggle parents. The two little ones glanced at each other, and a trace of anger flashed in each other's eyes. The little lion's anger is also anger, isn't it? Seeing this scene, Dumbledore gave a slight sigh, but did not pierce the idea of the two little ones, and was about to turn around and arrange for the protection of the two little ones, lest they be attacked. However, Seal got into the box first, and soon took out two binoculars and threw them to Mr. William and Mr. Granger. Before everyone could react, Seal shouted happily. "Sniper Charles Lancaster, Observer William Lancaster, report to you." After he finished speaking, he didn't forget to hug Fawkes, who was sleeping on the sofa, and then shouted in Fawkes's confused eyes, "Fawkes has been in place for the rapid transfer of positions and the warning device for the enemy. Lancaster, the sniper support team is always ready to go." Quote. As soon as Seal's voice fell, Hermione on the side couldn't help laughing. A phoenix was just played by Seal into a quick position transfer and a warning device for the enemy and the enemy. At this time, Hermione finally understood why Charles always wanted to steal Dumbledore's phoenix. I have to say that as a tool bird, Fawkes is really easy to use. Of course, this matter must not be told to Fawkes, otherwise, Fawkes will definitely be angry and turn Seal into a bald man. Chapter 157_Showdown postponed to the afternoon. Because of the temporary participation of Shire and Hermione, and the Muggle tactics provided by Mr. William, Dumbledore humbly accepted Mr. William's suggestion and decided to postpone the decisive battle to the afternoon. Of course, no one was idle during this period. Although Muggle weapons were guns, strictly speaking, they were similar to those of wizards, and they were all directional. When everyone saw some of the military knowledge that Mr. William learned when he was a soldier, they immediately felt that war could still be played like this. As a result, a strange scene appeared in Shire's eyes. A group of wizards ate the food provided by the friendship of several wives, while listening to Mr. William, a Muggle doctor who had served as a soldier, talking about three things. System interspersed tactics, even Dumbledore was immersed in it. What's more, he felt that it was not enough to talk about it, so he waved his hand to create a blackboard and chalk. Mr. William was also polite and began to pick up the chalk on the blackboard to demonstrate what is called big depth interspersed. Hangfei, a group of people listened with relish. Only Seal thought it was very magical. After listening to it for a while, Seal was surprised to find that he was meowing, "Wasn't it my rabbit's trick?" Sure enough, the sentence that they both live like each other was not just casually said. Seal is doubting life here, constantly wondering whether the group of wizards who have opened Pandora's box will finally learn the classic idea that if you are poor, you will intersperse tactics, and if you are rich, you will blow up lousy. He didn't notice that Hermione, who was following him, had disappeared without a trace, holding his wand gun and his father. Until the end, even Dumbledore was immersed in some of the tactics described by Mr. William. One thing I have to admit is that compared with the development of wizards, the development of Muggles is a bloody history of war, without magical power. They are far more skilled in various tactics than any wizard. As long as any wizard pays attention to Muggles, he will find that this is definitely a huge treasure. Take Lao Fu, who is very open in private, as an example. For students who don't know, you can go to Station B and look for Voldemort's sexy dance, absolutely beautiful. If Lao Fu paid more attention to the tactics of the Muggles, then there would never be a scene where a large group of people lined up to play against the waves in the decisive battle of the movie, so it is really hard to say who will win in the end. Lao Fu is not going to dance to make a living after his failure, pure spoof. I really can't forget that scene, gone. In the end, it was Seal who interrupted the study of the group of wizards after eating and drinking. Of course, they received very bad glances from everyone, and the whole Seal was extremely aggrieved. If you plan to study today and postpone your actions until tomorrow, then just ignore what I interrupted. Under the eyes of everyone who wanted to eat people, Seal finally followed his heart and made excuses for his actions. Gave a reason. The people who woke up like a dream realized that it was already in the afternoon, and they were bustlingly preparing to leave. Due to the large number of people, Dumbledore kindly provided everyone with 3 door keys. When Charles heard the way to travel, he pulled Hermione and quietly began to lean towards Fawkes. On the contrary, Mr. William and Mr. Granger were excited. Both of them were experiencing the way of a wizard for the first time. Looking at the excited 2 people, Charles was really embarrassed to interrupt their fantasies. Just like that, when the time was approaching, Seal and Hermione reacted quickly and immediately released the door key, turned around and grabbed Fawkes, who was still watching the fun. Seal even shouted unceremoniously, "Fawkes, take me and Hermione to our destination." At first, Fawkes was also frightened, and random Fawkes also reacted. Dumbledore had previously explained that he would take care of the 2 little guys, and at this time it was also a driving duty. At the same time, Fawkes turned into flames with a phoenix roar and disappeared into the flames with Seal and Hermione. At this moment, Dumbledore and his 2 mothers were left in the hut staring at what had just happened. Dumbledore was even more dumbfounded. Originally, he was thinking of asking Fawkes to send himself to the Ministry of Magic, and then asking Fawkes to find Seal as a starting signal. This wave of actions by Seal directly dispelled Dumbledore's assumptions, and it was impossible to calculate that Seal had rejected the wizard's movement method to such an extent. Fortunately, I still have a contractual relationship with Fawkes, and I can still do it simply by sending a signal or something. Cough, those 2 ladies, then I'll go first, you 2 don't worry too much. After speaking, he turned around and walked to the fireplace, honestly using the flow network. Even at such a long distance even Dumbledore couldn't use apparition. What's more, Dumbledore still has to save his brain power to deal with the verbal battles in the afternoon. After all, he is going to drag the entire Ministry of Magic, so this battle with officials from various families and officials is absolutely indispensable. As Dumbledore disappeared into the green flames of the fireplace, the whole room fell silent in an instant, leaving only Mrs. Granger and Mrs. William, and a bodyguard, Meow-Fu. The 2 wives ignored Meow-Fu. They sat on the sofa with worried faces and began to pray continuously. Although they fired cold shots, they still couldn't change the fact that their husbands and children were on the battlefield at this time. Seeing this situation, Meow-Fu didn't know what to say. Compared with the chaos abroad, the situation on the rabbit's side was much better. Seeing the 2 worried mothers, Meow-Fu didn't know what to say to comfort them. In the end all the words turned into a helpless sigh. Hey, what a fucking war. After speaking, Meow-Fu turned to open the door and went to the gate to prepare to stand guard. Although he was not on the front line, the mission of the rabbit also told Meow-Fu that the protection work at the rear must also be done well, and he could only hope that everyone would return safely. The words are divided into 2 parts. Although the 2 wives in the back have been worried, the picture in front is obviously very funny. When Shire and Hermione appeared in a valley with the flames, everyone else had already arrived. At this time, everyone was comforting the 2 men who were leaning against the tree and vomited pale. That's right, Mr. William and Mr. Granger. The 2 who were excited to experience the wizard's way now deeply realized what it means to be in deep water. Watching the 2 children comfortably emerge from the flames with Fawkes, the 2 brothers and sisters turned out to be very unified outside of their minds. Speaking of which, do you want to go back and discuss with your wife to practice a trumpet? Chapter 158_Sniper Elite, Char. Of course, this kind of thinking can only be complained. As a tactics teacher, Mr. Williams' prestige built up in the morning is still there. After a short rest, he immediately pulled everyone to start map research and layout. Seal didn't listen to it. He and Hermione's mission was very simple. To put it bluntly, it was enough to release the cold shot under the supervision of the 2 parents. As for the sniper position, the enemy's choice was all 2 observers. Call the shots. As long as Seal and Hermione feel at ease as ruthless launch machines, Seal, who was free, began to observe this so-called farm. Strictly speaking, it was not a farm in the formal sense. It's just a small farmhouse building built in the valley. The main factor for being called a farm may be the buildings that look like barns. Of course, the existence of a magician is unreasonable in itself. It doesn't look like a lot if you don't keep them together, and even some dilapidated building facades will have an unbelievable amount of space. After thinking about it, Seal decided not to worry about these matters. While the others were still taking the task at Mr. William, Seal then remembered Hermione, who had been very absent today. It took a lot of energy for Seal to squeeze into the crowd. He listened earnestly to Mr. William's arrangement of small hairballs and dragged them out. Looking at Hermione with a dissatisfied face, Seal was still a little puzzled. "Aren't we shooting cold shots? I don't think it's very useful to listen to me, not to mention that the commander is by our side. Hermione, I think you should follow the command." Seeing Hermione's appearance, Seal made his mind go wrong. Seal didn't want Hermione to follow Harry's example and secretly start charging with a large army, even if it was Gryffindor, like Harry did. Tigers are also a minority. Seriously, if it wasn't for Dumbledore's explicit or implicit help in the original book, it would be unknown whether Harry, who believed in recklessness, would have survived these 2 years, let alone Seal, a butterfly, from the very beginning. "Flutter your wings." Seeing Seal looking at her worriedly, Hermione smiled proudly. "Seal, don't think of me as Harry and Ron. I won't do their stupid things, and, also, you're not the only one who gets the idea." After speaking, he did not forget to look up at Seal proudly, and at the same time showed Seal that he was prepared. Seal stared blankly at the small box that Hermione hid behind him, which was exactly the treasure box of Seal. Seeing Hermione's smug look, Seal knew that this little girl must have some strange idea, and Mr. Granger had already agreed, otherwise this little girl would never have laughed so smugly. Thinking of this, Seal pretended to look at Hermione fiercely. "Okay, little girl, you didn't tell me you had a good plan." Seeing that Seal's simple and kind face, no matter how you look at it, was trying to put on a vicious expression, Hermione burst out laughing. "Trust me, this plan is definitely not suitable for you. Ha ha ha, well, you can play by yourself, I'm going to listen to the tactical arrangement." After speaking, regardless of Ciel's reaction, he took Ciel's small box and squeezed into the crowd again, leaving only Ciel looking at Hermione, who was leaving with a dull expression on his face. Before Charles could react, his mind was full of dogs, and when you changed your mind, Mr. William's battle meeting was over. Looking at the scattered people, Mr. William looked at Ciel, who was still in a daze with some doubts, and stepped forward and patted Ciel on the shoulder. "Little soldier, let's go." After he finished speaking, Fawkes, who was on Ciel's shoulders, was about to lead Ciel up the mountain. At this time, Ciel came to his senses and quickly grabbed his father. "Wait," Fawkes left it to Hermione. Hearing Ciel's words, Mr. William couldn't help showing a mysterious smile and replied, "No need, Granger told me, Phoenix is still left to us, and it is still very important for snipers to move their positions." Ciel was at a loss for what he said. He acted as if Hermione was not a sniper. Could it be possible that Hermione could still change jobs? Ciel, who had not figured it out after thinking hard, finally got down to it at the urging of Mr. William. After a while, the two came to the position selected by Mr. William. It has to be said that the soldiers who have been soldiers are different. The place that Mr. William chose can almost overlook the entire building complex, and even occasionally can pass through. The windows saw people moving around the house. Ciel set up his sniper wand as he did in the game, and a feeling of playing Call of Duty again began to flow out of his heart. Now that everything is ready, it's time for Dumbledore, who is Makarov, to signal. After waiting for a while, Fawkes behind the two seemed to feel something, and immediately fluttered his wings and flew high, hovering above the sky, and a phoenix roar resounded through the valley. This sound of fungning was like pressing the button to start the game. The enemy immediately poured out of the room after hearing this sound of fungning. The members of the Order of the Phoenix here were also unceremonious. Following the squad tactics that Mr. William talked about in the morning, they began to continuously attack the enemy's line of defense. After a while, the battle between the two sides began to continue to become anxious. Just when the enemies thought they could hold on to the Lord and get a counter kill, two slightly thick red rays suddenly appeared in the mountains on both sides of the valley. The two rays quickly hit the two dark wizards who were rushing in front of them with arrogant faces. The two dark wizards were rushing happily. Who would have thought that justice would come from the sky, and the wand in his hand flew out in an instant. Just when the two of them looked at their hands with some doubts, the wizard here was not polite, and immediately made up a few stun spells. The two dark wizards were in a coma and didn't know why their wands suddenly came out of their hands. Of course, it was Seal and Hermione who did this. Hermione didn't know about it for the time being, but Seal was already having fun. That's right, just having fun. Under Mr. William's precise burst, Charles felt for a while that he was not holding a magic wand, but a laser sniper rifle. From removing your weapon to fainting, Charles began to kill the quartet under the wisdom of Mr. William. The most irritating thing is that Fox, who was originally used to transfer the position, found that he didn't seem to need to play any role at all. He only needed to observe the whole battle situation on the head of everyone, and occasionally see if other people needed to save the field by himself. Chapter 159-Tanya. Hermione. As for the reason that makes Fox so easy, it is actually very simple. To sum it up, it is actually one word: accuracy. That's right, accuracy. Seal's attack can hit the enemy with precision, even though these dark wizards all know where Seal fired the cold shot, and they have also tried to fight back. But soon they discovered a desperate thing. Every time Seal fired, he could accurately kill an enemy, but he clearly knew where the opponent was, but every time he fired a spell, it would end up in the wrong direction. To 108,000 miles away. This also led to the fact that Charles and Mr. William didn't have to think about which position to change, and what to do to change a place with a shot. This discovery made all our teammates very excited. After all, you don't need to consider the enemy's sneak attack. It's good to stand at a distance and attack the enemy with peace of mind. All close enemies will be executed by the two little guys in Shanshan. Just get another knife. All of a sudden, everyone's morale was soaring, and the magic spells in their hands began to become more and more cheerful. On the other hand, the black wizards found that they could not threaten the two enemies on the mountain that they could strike with precision, so there were only two options left. And keep yourself protected at all times, otherwise the companions lying on the ground in front of you are the best example. What's more, under the blessing of Mr. Williams' 3-3 system team, the formation of the dark wizards gathered together to fire in a salvo was more like a huge target for a while. Under such circumstances, the black wizard was beaten and retreated. Finally, some people can't stand this situation. Although there are various such research materials available here, there are countless muggles serving, eating and drinking, but all of this must be enjoyed with life. Compared with being knocked down and locked in various prisons, the dark wizards are most confident in their own means of escape. For a time, countless people want to apparate and leave here. This move was soon discovered by the members of the Order of the Phoenix, but what surprised them also happened. The dark wizards who successfully activated apparition appeared in the same place after a twist. Newt immediately thought of the masked people, whom Dumbledore had said could be trusted, but the moment they reached the valley, these people disappeared. Now that I think about it, it turns out that I was going to set up this super large anti-apparition circle. Thinking of this, Newt couldn't help but feel a burst of excitement. They can't escape. Pay attention to safety and prevent counterattacks. Of course, Newt was not the only one who discovered this situation, and some older dark wizards also discovered the existence of the anti-apparition magic circle for the first time. For a time, the dark wizard camp experienced a panic, but it was quickly enveloped by a vicious atmosphere. Dark wizards all have a characteristic, because they are all fugitives. In the face of the enemy's advantage and their own disadvantage, the first reaction is to escape, but when they can't escape, then it is time to desperately All dark wizards knew at this time that it was time to work hard. If they fought hard at this time, it was possible to continue to enjoy a free life in the future, otherwise only the prison cell was waiting for them. Thinking of Azkaban and the various prisons in various countries, that feeling is definitely an existence that is worse than death. At this time, all the dark wizards showed their unique skills of pressing the bottom of the box. There were all kinds of magic in the scene. Some people turned into giant bears and tried to fight melee'ly. All kinds of bizarre magical animals, and some of them suddenly become things that can make people crazy. All kinds of strange black magic flew around the battlefield below for a while, and even Seal had to avoid the edge for a while. The reason was very simple. A deranged black wizard used the calendar fire to ignite the woods in the mountain where Seal was. Seal could only rush to put out the fire first. Fortunately, although the use of elemental magic was sealed, Seal's ability to communicate with elements was still there. Otherwise, in the face of Lihuo, Seal and Mr. William would only have to escape. Seal is rushing to put out the fire, and the members of the Order of the Phoenix are not feeling well when they are fighting fiercely in the valley. The Dark Wizards fighting back is so powerful that these battle-hardened members of the Order of the Phoenix are a little bit overwhelmed for a while. Feel tricky. Especially at this time, when Sha went to deal with the problem of Lihuo, the support suddenly dropped, and their pressure was even greater. Just as Newt was about to instruct everyone to defend the defense line with their hind legs and never let these dark wizards leave, a broom suddenly flew out from the mountain next to him. A girl with a ponytail and earphones got up on a broom, holding a sight that looked like a sniper rifle in her hand, and flew into the sky after a while. No spell above that height could hit her. Just as Newt was wondering, from a distance, he vaguely saw the girl turn the muzzle down, and the muzzle was constantly lit up with the light of the spell. With the launch of the girl, the position on the Dark Wizard's side suddenly began to explode violently, as if it had been washed by a bomb. Sha, who had just dealt with the mountain fire, stared blankly at the girl with a ponytail flying high in the sky, and couldn't believe his eyes for a while. Hermione. Seal said the name of the girl in the sky with some doubts, but he was madly complaining in his heart. How does this image look like that of the demon girl Tanya in Tanya Wars? The difference between the two is nothing more than a flying device riding on a broom and stepping on it like a parachute bag. Looking at the girl in the sky from a distance, constantly bombarding the enemy's positions, for a while, Sha'ur's heart really felt like tens of thousands of grass and mud horses passed by, and he not only began to suspect that he was really in the same place. Sirius HP World. Even Mr. William was a little stunned. After all, he was familiar with Hermione's operations strictly speaking. Eagle Sauce had a similar style called an air gunboat. He really called for support when he was a soldier. In the end, it was Seal who reacted first, looking at Hermione in the sky and looking at Fox, who only really knew you today, shouted, "Fox, take me to the other side." When Fox heard Seal's call, he took a dive and came to Seal's side. Seal raised his hand, and with a burst of flames, Seal and Mr. William disappeared and appeared behind Mr. Granger. At this time, Mr. Granger was holding up the binoculars and the walkie-talkie while commanding Hermione in the sky excitedly, "Fire coverage from East 23 to West 45. Hearing Mr. Granger's wisdom, Seal had a black line, and the good guy was really a gunboat in the air. Granger also noticed that Mr. William behind him was a little excited and said to Mr. William, "Brother, I didn't expect that one day I would be able to command the Air Force to the fullest." Chapter 160-Gold Galleons, Silver Cosi and Copper Gnat. Compared to the excitement of the two fathers, Seal frowned. To be honest, Seal didn't know whether Hermione was right or wrong. Morally speaking, when he came to help his side to lay the victory of this small-scale war. On the other hand, the emergence of Hermione's tactics also means that the wizards will face the waves from the old one-stop group style, slowly. Began to evolve the air-ground integrated combat during World War II. On the other hand, although Seal shouted inwardly that Tanya was possessed, the Conceal had already begun to worry about Hermione's mental health. You must know that Hermione was the creator of this strategic bombing. Is it a bit bad for Hermione to start this experience so early at such a young age? Not to mention Hermione, it was the first time that Charles of 2 lifetimes faced Voldemort's bewitchment and almost killed him. His heart collapsed. It's still a little embarrassing to think of Seal here. After all, there is a difference between defeating Voldemort and directly killing Voldemort. To be honest, Seal, as a 5 good citizen with a red flag in his bones, is still resistant to such illegal things. Of course, Seal felt that he was a real time traveler. If it was made into a movie or written into a novel, his crying scene would definitely be a big poison. Wait, Aunt Rowling in other timelines won't write about me, right? Or is there a goddamn author writing about me? Charles whispered to himself in a low voice. But the sadness on the faces of the 2 fathers who had served as soldiers was obvious at a glance, and they looked at each other and felt a little happy in their hearts. After all, Seal was still very worried about the Valkyrie in the sky. Just as Seal lowered his head and muttered to himself, Mr. Granger interrupted Seal. "Charles, don't worry about Hermione," Hermione said. "According to her spell, at most it will be stunned. And burns, and, I've removed her scope before, and I'll order Hermione straight back later, so don't worry." Hearing Mr. Granger's words, Seal came out of the horns just now, and put on a faint smile on his face. He didn't want his little Harry Ball to become like Tanya. Thinking of Tanya who is Uncle Sol Lolita, Charles couldn't help shivering. Seeing Hermione, the Valkyrie who had just finished showing off her power in the sky, slowly flew towards her, Charles couldn't help shivering. "I still decided to go out and test it." The words are divided into 2 parts. Not long after the sniper support of Seal appeared, in the room on the top floor of the entire farm, a figure just reached 1 meter, wearing a golden beak mask made of gold, and the whole body was shrouded in black. The man in the robe appeared at the window, watching the battle below. "Master Jin, do you need us to release synthetic monsters to support those dark wizards?" asked the figure wearing a silver beak mask and a red robe behind the golden beak. Hearing the subordinate's question, the guy named Jinyi sneered. "No, it's just a group of unusable dark wizards. Not even a decent dark wizard. It seems that I want to find another Tom Riddle. It's really difficult." Hearing the words of the person with the golden mask, the silver mask bowed slightly and stepped back a few steps to hide in the darkness, waiting for the next instruction from the golden mask. The man in the golden mask looked at the melee below so coldly, until the appearance of Hermione and Newt, and then there was some movement. The golden mask slowly stepped back and withdrew from the sight of the small window, looking angrily at Yin-Yi, who was standing by the side respectfully. "Damn, those people are not the Ministry of Magic, they are Dumbledore." Yin-Yi immediately asked the copper nut to clean up the traces. "Take that monster, and we will leave through the door." After speaking, regardless of how Yin-Yi informed him, he walked straight to the wall, and then pulled out a magic wand and tapped it on the wall. The red wall, which was originally made of bricks, immediately looked like the entrance to Diagon Alley. Yang opened one. The small door was just enough for Jinyi to pass through. There is a small elevator behind the door. Jinyi stepped on the elevator, and then took out his wand and inserted it into the place where the floor buttons were placed. Following Jinyi's chanting of some fairy words, the wand was like a key. It was inserted out of thin air into the pile of floor buttons. As Jinyi twisted, the elevator descended extremely fast, and after a while, he appeared in a huge underground cavity. The area of this empty space is as large as 5 or 6 football fields, densely packed with various equipment, and this goblin with a copper-colored beak mask on his face is busy carrying things. In the center of the entire field, a huge dragon-like creature stands out in a huge glass jar. Although the shape looks like a giant dragon from a distance, if you look closely, you will find that it should have been it was the place where the dragon's limbs were replaced by clumps of tentacles. The original eye-catching dragon's eyes on the dragon's head have disappeared, leaving only 3 pairs of red round eyes, and the teeth are even more exposed, as if there are no lips. No, it can't be said that there are no lips. If you have to say it, it is more like a sucker with a circle of sharp teeth. The whole dragon has completely lost the appearance of a dragon. Instead, It is more like some kind of monster in the evil spot. Same. Jin Yi, who had just stepped out of the elevator, just glanced at the monster standing in the middle of the field, and then was surrounded by a group of fairies wearing golden beak masks. Master Jin, the door has been debugged and can be set off at any time, said a man in a silver mask. Jin Yi nodded slowly and said to the other person with a silver mask, Silver, tell the copper nut to speed up and move them all away. A silver mask beside Jin Yi nodded immediately and left for a long time. Then, as if he remembered something, he turned around and looked at the silver mask who just said, Silver-san, get ready to blow up the entire institute. Yin-san jumped up in surprise when he heard this. Master Jin. We still have a complete understanding of the research materials of those black wizards, so. Before Yin-san finished speaking, he was interrupted by Jin Yi. Blow it up, don't keep it at all, or you can go and explain it to the council directly. After he finished speaking, he glanced at the evil dragon in the center. This thing is directly sealed in the secret chamber of the parliament in the deepest part of Gringotts. No one is allowed to mention it without the order of the parliament. After he finished speaking, he ignored Yin-san behind him, and walked forward with a cold snort. Walking all the way to a quiet office, Jin Yijie calmed down. As if remembering something, he took out a small mirror from his desk and put it in front of him and waited for a while. After a while, a voice appeared in the mirror. Long time no see, Jin Yi. Hearing this voice, Jin Yi immediately snapped back angrily. I'm not good at all, Frank.